Hello. Hello, hello. Good afternoon, Keith. Thank you for saying so. Hello, Mario. Thank you for saying
Good
so.
afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Allison. Thank you for literally saying so. Thank you. That's awesome. Good afternoon. I'm going to keep going. Wait, this is how it works. I mean, we got 2.5 hours. We could spend 3 minutes on humanity. But who was it? I just missed. Oh, yes. Okay, I'm going back. Oh, and people are coming in. Hang on, but you definitely got that. Yes, good afternoon, Key. I said that. Hello, Mario. Good afternoon, Bree. Thank you for saying so. Good afternoon, Christina. Thank you for saying so. Hi, Dennis. Hello, Bradley. Good afternoon, Christopher. Hello, Samantha. Good afternoon, Juliana. Hello. And I will also laugh out loud. Mario. Hi, Panina. Good afternoon, Valentina. That's awesome. Oh, there's more people. Hold on. Believe me, I promise we really will do physics. We won't just say hello all period. Well, we might. Okay. Hello, hello. Good afternoon, Michaela. I didn't say that. Hi, Evie. I think it's Evie. Correct me if I'm or I think it's Evie. Good afternoon, Valentina. Maybe I said that already. I think I did. Okay, we're here. Good. I'm gathering that you can hear me. I also don't know how to. Okay, give me a second. So you see the board, right? You see the board. And we are recording, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're gonna do more physics today, but we're gonna do some bookkeeping things first. We're still getting to know each other. Okay, 1, 2, 6, 10, 14, 18, 19. Okay, people are still coming. Good afternoon, Alexis. Oops. Oh, that's Evelyn. Okay, got you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do that too, actually. Okay, yes. Good afternoon, Evelyn. Good afternoon, Dante. Awesome to see you all. And thank you again, Evelyn and Dante and Alexis and Bree and Bradley and Juliana and Key for spicing up your Zoom boxes. It helps. It really does. I'm telling you, but soon you guys are going to trust me enough to show video. But and I'll say something quickly about that again too. By the way, I know there's people don't like showing video. I get it. I do. And I'm not forcing you. But there's one reason to not show video that I want to address. I know that you know that I know that one reason people don't like showing video is because then if they do want to leave for something or like go to the, whatever, take a break, then they feel like it's more noticeable that they just walked away because they were showing video and then they turn it off. And that's like all true, but it's not. Like I'm telling you, if you show video at all, I will appreciate that even for the 5 minutes that you do. And then when it's off again, you're just like everybody else that it's off. I'm not going to track consciously people. You know what I'm saying? Like just every good thing that a person does is a good thing. And don't ever not do a good thing because then you think it's going to like set a standard that you can't meet for when you're doing the less good thing. Like we all make that mistake as scientists. So anyway, whenever you can show video, even if it's for a second, it just helps. Anyway, okay, wait, so I'm going to count again. 6, 10, 14, 18, 19. Okay. And good afternoon. Oh, I said Dante. Okay. Also, if anybody knows, somehow at some point in some other context, not this class, I like locked my participant and chat windows to my screen. I don't know how I did that. And I'd like to, if anybody knows how to unlock them or unfreeze them or whatever, or maybe it's under view. Good. And anyway, okay, people are coming in. All right, we're going to do some bookkeeping, but I hope that any windows that I freeze on my side don't come up in the recordings. Let me know in private chat if I know some of you have. I mean, I noticed obviously some of you checked out the YouTube thing even briefly. That's great. That's another way to get points. You notice one of the portals is called like you subscribe or something. If you don't have to subscribe, but if you go to the YouTube channel at all and check out anything ever and make use of it at all, like you get any help from it at all ever, you can screenshot that for 1 second and then submit that for points. And obviously, and subscribing is one such way. Okay, we're gonna get rolling on physics. Who else is here? But I have some bookkeeping. All right, I'm gonna ask you directly because I was in touch with Professor Talley last night. I understand. I know 22 of you showed up yesterday. I know, And of course, we both share the Google Classroom, so I see what's going on. I know the first lab can be stressful. We're going to get to the, and I know you get to the material there before you get to it here. That's the way it always goes. It'll all come out in the wash. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You know, and it's a 5-week course, so we dive right in. But I also know that 22 people showed up to lab yesterday. Oh, wait. Oh, there's a drop down button. Oh, maybe that is what I'm talking about. Wait, thank you, Bradley. That is what I'm talking. Oh, I think that is what I'm talking about. Thank you. Hold on. Sorry, because it didn't move. Yes, I think that was it. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Bradley. Remind me someone in a text or something at some point to you can remind me in text. I'm going to set up a portal for things like that, like helping the professor with his technical stupidity. That was definitely very helpful. And yeah, I mean, you'd think if I were a physics professor, I wouldn't need that help, but I would. Okay, so thank you. Does anybody want to put in the private chat or the public? Do you happen to know? Well, let me put it this way. Did all of you that are here right now show up to lab today? I mean, if any of you did not show up to lab, just tell me in the private chat, please. You're not going to get in trouble, but okay, great. Thank you. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to, okay, great. I'm going to ask a slightly dicey question now. Again, it is not to get anybody in trouble. I'm not asking you, no one's going to get in trouble, but we do need to work out these registration issues. Like, you know, people work hard to get in this class spot, and the spots are limited in the lab, as you know. So I'm going to ask a slightly dicey question. I know that Samantha Davis is here today. Thank you. And I know that, thank you for being here. Thank you for submitting in all your work so far. I know you have. And we'll talk about everybody's work in a second. But there's also another Samantha in this class, or at least on the roster. Does anybody know, and her last name I'll look up in a second, but I don't think we've seen her. I'm not trying to get her in trouble. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Does anybody in the class know anything about, I'm going to ask you. Hold on. Does anybody in the class know anything about Samantha Mariano? Or is she here right now under a different name? Can she identify herself? Or was she here yesterday and I missed that fact? Yeah, oh, she wasn't. Okay. Okay. That's super helpful, Evelyn. Thank you. That is super helpful information. Good enough for me. I totally appreciate it. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and you did the right thing. Yeah, I mean, she should reach out to me just to clarify what's going on. Again, nobody's in trouble or anything, but that helps, and it helps that you're representing her. Thank you. Okay. Give me a pause for 1 second here. And we'll get back to business. Okay. Okay, we've got things. I'm sure now you're going to have questions for me. Our ultimate goal, again, of course, is to get back to homework 1 and keep going over it. And for me to use it as an excuse, not just to go over the answers, but to start talking about concepts that are part of homework 1, homework 1B. I mean, we have to keep going over it. As I said, we're going to take a long time because we're going to end up going down roads from each question. We're going to back up and like re-explain old things and calculus things, or make sure that everybody's on the same page with them. So it's going to take a little while. We're not going to finish one. Oh, excuse me for a second. 1 second. Hold on. Pardon. Let me 1 second. You want to say hello? Okay.
Hello, I'm Professor Felix.
That's very nice. Okay. Very
I'm
good.
the boss of him.
Yes, that's probably true.
Goodbye, students.
Okay.
Whatever you do,
Okay.
don't listen to him.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Love you. Bye. Have a good time. Okay. Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Okay. Based. I still don't really know. Oh, he's still doing it from the window. All right. I don't even really know what base means, but I think I do. Okay. Okay. I forget what I was just saying. Homework 1B is the goal of today. We're going to get back to it eventually soon. We're going to be going through the material. We're not going to finish it today. Okay, so let me start by saying, technically it was due like the beginning of this period. So even if it just came in at the beginning of this period, it wasn't late or anything like that. No one had a responsibility to turn it in, this morning or something. However, of course, many people did. So many of you turned in homework 1B already, and many of you got back a number already. Let me just be super clear about these numbers, okay? And I'm impressed. Actually, I'm super impressed with what many of you have already done with 1B. If you haven't gotten it back in, if like you just turned it in, that does not mean you're late. And whatever, and it doesn't mean you're not going to eventually get full credit for it. If you did get a number, let me remind you that the number that you got was a preliminary number that was based on me looking at it extremely quickly, like before class. Most of you, I scrolled through super quick just to basically see if basically you're handling the structure of these assignments correctly, the formatting and stuff like that. And basically, if you were thoroughly on your own piece of paper, thoroughly and thoughtfully addressing each question with some version of the 5-step method. You'll notice there's like no comments on it or anything like that yet. I mean, there's very few. Occasionally I put comments here or there, or particularly at the end, I often scroll very quickly to see how you handled the hardest part of it, which is what we eventually want to get to. To be really honest, I often scrolled straight to the end to see how honestly you handled the end. Like whether you just like ripped something off the internet and just wrote it down, or whether you started it and then said, I'm stuck here. That was partly what I was looking for. No matter what, if you did it and you did it thoroughly, you tried it thoroughly and you showed work with 5-step method, then you probably got some number of points, like somewhere around 26, 27, 28, 29. If you did some considerable amount of work on the last one and actually showed some honest like attempt to unpack it, and maybe you got some things from the internet, but you were sort of honest in saying like, I don't really get this. If you made some serious thoughtful headway on the last one, then you might have gotten something like a 31 or a 32 or something. But just to be clear, all of you are still going to get a 35 if you want to. Again, this is a first draft on your part, and it was a first quick pass on my part just to see that we're all on the same page. Okay, so there's, and I was very cursory. There is definitely still time to update, revise based on things that we talk about in class, particularly that last one. So there's still an opportunity for everybody to get a 35. And if I put something like a 28, that doesn't even mean I'm criticizing you. It just means it's pretty evident that we're not done with this yet. It's not, it's not fully nailed yet. So cool. But anything, if you got anything in the 20s, you're off to a flying start in this class. We're on the same page, yada, yada, yada. And if you haven't turned it in yet, or you just turned in, you're also not late. It's not an issue yet. Okay. So I just want to make that clear in terms of the numbers. Just consider whatever number you got good so far, and opportunity to get more. On the other one, that's all about 1B. And again, by the way, I actually am impressed how fast most people did already turn it in, and people did pretty darn thorough work. I'm very aware that by the time you get out of this class, it's already 7 p.m. That doesn't make it. Okay, I'm going to actually say this. I'm going to go there. This whole thing about these 5-week classes. I mean, I don't want to waste too much time saying this because we don't have much, but this whole 5-week class thing is a myth, right? Like we all know that, yes, they shove all the classes together. So technically it's the same number of instructional hours that you would have in a full semester. But the big lie, so technically it's like fair to compress all this material into 5 weeks, but no, it's not fair. It's outrageous. Let's just be clear, because you have the same number of instructional hours, but you don't have nearly the amount of time at home to do anything for those instructional hours. That's what's outrageous about a 5-week course. And there's only, I mean, so much I can do about it, but I can at least tell you I'm aware of that. So I'm impressed that you all got 1B back to me so fast and so thoroughly. Okay, blah, 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 blah. And if you didn't, you still can. 1A, it's true, you weren't meant to spend as much time on it, wasn't meant to be stressful. Anybody who, so I looked at that very quickly too. We are going to go over it. We are, you'll see why. We're going to go over it fast, but we are going to go over it. It's just that with 1A was more an opportunity for me to make sure that you and I are on the same page as far as formatting and structure, because sadly, that really matters. Part of all of these homeworks, part of the purpose, sorry, let me just change the view of the screen. Part of the purpose, oh, based is like, cool. Okay, oh, sorry. Part of the purpose of all these homeworks is to make sure that you know exactly what I'm looking for by the time we get to an exam, because the exams are take home, but they're big. So I don't want there to be any confusion or room for confusion as far as how you prepare a document to make it as easy and appealing for a reader to handle, to read, to assess, to mark up, to grade, to whatever, all of which is like long-term practicing for trying to get things published. So, so let me say this on homework 1A, almost any, I'm interested. I wanted to see what you were thinking about it. I now see what you think, and I see that we do need to go over it. But my main thing was, do you just get that what we need from here on is that you present all your work on separate blank white sheets of paper? Please don't write onto the question sheets. I mean, even if you have cool technology that allows you to do that, and yes, it's very tempting even to me to do that. I get it, but I have 1,000 reasons why I don't want that. I don't want you to return the original questions to me. I want you to treat everything that's assigned here, treat it like you're writing into a blue book. And then in that blue book, oh yes, you have to make each question clear. You do in your own words with your own abbreviations. Indeed, that is step 2 of the 5-step method. And indeed, to many of you, that seems like a complete waste of time. Like, why don't I just let you Xerox the original questions instead of forcing you to go over and like rewrite them in your words? One of the reasons is I found out the hard way the second time or the third time I was in graduate school, that part of the hugest, most important tasks of a science researcher in any field is to really understand what the question is before they start trying to adjust it. And the best way to show that you really understand the ins and outs of a question is to be forced to phrase it in your terms. I mean, I'm going to say it over and over again later on, but and again, maybe you're not convinced, but maybe you eventually will be. Either way, so if you got a 1, if you got a score of a 1 on either assignment, or like if you got a score of a 1, don't be alarmed, don't be insulted, don't be upset, and don't be worried. If you got a 1, that is just my way of getting your attention, just signaling you that I saw your work, that you're not getting a 0 or whatever. I'm putting a number in so you see it, but it's my way of saying, hold on, wait, actually, I can't even like read this yet until you do it the way we're asking. I need you not to write your answers on to the questions. I need you to open up a blank sheet of paper and present an independent document. As soon as you do, I'll read it and you'll get a 20 on the, on assignment 1A. 1A, everybody's getting a 20 as long as they just like do it, but do it in the right way. Okay, so I hope that's clear. I will look in the chat in a second. But as long as I'm yammering about this, a different way to put it, whether it's to justify or a different way for you to know whether you're sort of doing it right. Whenever you present work to me, the real goal is to present independent, self-sufficient physics work. What you're really trying to practice, like I give you an assignment, right? Because I'm the teacher and you're the student. Okay, so it's like a game. It's like an exercise. Like obviously we're not about to win the Nobel Prize for some conversation that you and I are having. So I present you an assignment. but the assignments are legitimate physics questions. And more in this course, you're going to see that more and more the questions don't even have numbers in them. They have constants and variables. They have letters. So more and more the questions I'm asking you, or the problems I'm asking you to solve, are asking you to derive general physics findings. Now, I'm not asking you to be original, like these findings have been already found out before. But if you do the homework correctly, or you do these exams correctly, your work can and should stand alone as independent little physics proofs. If you do it right, if you take this approach and you do the 5-step method, and you just take out a piece of paper and start writing, like, given a mass of M on a spring of stiffness K, what would, and an initial velocity of V naught, what would be the velocity of the mass as it reaches equilibrium position, right? If you write that out, and then you write out a bunch of work, and then you get an answer and you circle it, well, then what you have there is an independent physics proof, right? You have a piece of actual legitimate physics reasoning that actually potentially could be published in a legitimate journal. Like, maybe it won't, because maybe someone's done it already, maybe. But if you do it cleverly enough, or with your own new twist, then maybe it can. You're trying to practice giving pieces of work that could be read and found interesting by anybody who knows physics or cares about physics, whether or not they're in this class. Like, that's actually part of the goal here, is to get in the habit of using my assignments as just excuses, as springboards for you to produce physics work that is independently readable on its own merits. That's part of the reason that I want you to just like have blank piece of paper and say, like, here's the situation, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve, or the proof that I'm trying to derive, here's the thought process, here's the conclusion. Boom. Then that is physics. It's not just student-teacher dialogue, it's physics. For what it's, so that's what you want to have in your mind when you're doing this stuff, is try to make it like that. You'll also be more proud of it that way, and you'll be proud of yourself. Okay, I'm yabbering. I'm going to go back to stuff. Okay, based is cool. Okay. Okay. I'm looking at the chat. There's some stuff in the private chat I'm not going to read out loud, but I am reading it. Okay, fine. Right. So something's in the chat about, like, if one of you made a mistake and like didn't submit something yet, and you're submitting it now, we are not at the point yet where I'm worried about lateness. Okay, just fine. I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate the communication. It helps. But everybody still is in a position where you can still get full credit for everything. I'll let you know when we're not in that place anymore. Okay. Still want to. Okay. I want to change the screen. So. I know we have to wait. Is there anything? Last two questions. We will go over homework 1A. I want to get a little bit more progress on homework 1B first, because it's more, I think it's more what people want to see, and you'll feel like you're getting your money's worth more. We will circle back to 1A in sort of when we sort of need a mental break at some point today. So we're about, oh, no problem. I'm looking at the chat. No problem. Okay, wait. I'm just looking at the chat. Sorry. Okay. So we're going to go to 1B in a moment. I think I had one other. Can I also confirm, everybody who wanted to, you saw yesterday that yesterday's notes were uploaded. I mean, you see where to find them, and you saw that the YouTube recording was, I mean, I'm not saying you had to look at them yet, but you see where to find those things as they happened. Can I get any? Cool. Thank you, Samantha. Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Michaela. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. Okay. See, I love this. I mean, it's these little things. Okay. Okay. Oh, I also noted. Okay. So I'm going to turn back to 1B. You can remind me if I really lose myself in 1B, since again, we're not going to finish it. You can, if someone wants to, if your brain starts getting overload from the physics in 1B at about, I would say, somewhere around 5:30, if someone wants to politely remind me and say, like, can we take a mental break and shift back to 1A? I'd be all for that. I mean, if we can literally take a break, I'll try to do that too, but sometimes we can't. But if you want to remind me around 5:30, because 1A will be a slightly more fun, more relaxing discussion. You're welcome, any of you, to remind me of that around 5:30 if you want. Okay. Other than that, are there any other? So I'm going to shift, and I'm going to shift screens in a second, or I'm going to shift the view. Is there any other question or anything I'm forgetting to address that anybody wanted to ask about grades or syllabus or procedures or anything before I go back to homework 1B? We're cool? Okay. Okay, so 1B. Change the name. Okay. All right, I'm going to rewrite my diagram just so that we can all see it. But again, like you guys said, or it's like someone asked me yesterday, you don't have to keep redrawing the diagram every time. Oh, well, okay. And you please do. I do try to go a little bit faster once I get rolling in 5-week course, but I encourage you all, whether you're at Professor Walters or not, whether you're from John Jay or not, if I ever use a symbol that you don't know, please don't be embarrassed to ask. I mean, please, if you don't know a symbol, you're not the only one. For example, I'm going to say right now, I'm not going to get all bogged down in this, but we're going to try not to. But when I use a triple equals, no, I am going to get bogged down. We do need to know this. Or maybe you could tell me in the chat if you know this from Professor Walters, but triple equal sign means.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So it means it's set in stone. It can't be changed, like manipulated in a sense. It's set in stone.
Yeah, well said. Okay.
Well,
oh, cool. Yeah. Oh, and I see what Alice. Yeah, it's a triple equal sign is stronger than a double equal sign. Yes, it's like set in stone, or it's like a fact. And I know. Okay, cool. Yes, and I'll tell you why, from my point of view, specifically why triple equal signs are stronger ultimately than double equal signs, because cool. All right. Thank you, Dante, and thank you, Allison, and thank you, Christopher. Because a triple equal sign means equal by definition, or sometimes, or law, less commonly, but whereas a double equal sign means equal by circumstance or discovery. Like PV equals nRT from chemistry, right? Just as an example, PV equals nRT, or even if you want a physics example, even like F equals mu times the normal, those are double equal signs. Those are descriptive laws. Those are, quite frankly, what most people in the regular world think most of science is. I mean, they don't consciously think this, but like PV equals nRT, the fact that pressure times volume equals a constant times temperature, or the fact that the frictional force equals the coefficient of friction times the normal force, these are discoveries. These are things that we find out in the lab. And the truth of the matter is, what we find out is that they are very, very, very largely true. They're true enough for us to rely on in a lot of circumstances. But they didn't need to be true. They're not strictly true. They are not, like, in other words, when we say PV equals nRT, I don't know, because chemistry tends to be more this way than physics. When we say PV equals nRT, what we're not saying is that the meaning of pressure times volume means temperature. Like, when you think of temperature, you don't automatically have to think of pressure times volume. It just turns out that they're related that way. But if we say something is equal by definition, I mean, if we say triple equal sign, we mean something is equal by definition. So if I say like I equals the square root of -1, or if I say here's a better example, average velocity equals displacement over time, that's the best example of all in a way. And most of what you learned at the beginning of Physics 203 are triple equal signs. When we say average velocity equals displacement over time, that is not something that someone figured out in a lab. We never, ever had to do any experiment to figure that out. And there's no experiment that anybody can ever do to show it wrong. There's no exception to that. Because when we say average velocity equals displacement over time, all we mean is that the word average velocity is an abbreviation that we came up with to save ourselves time, so we don't every time have to say displacement divided by time. It literally means if you looked up average velocity in a dictionary or in a physics dictionary, that's what it means. Okay, so right. So I mean, so I agree with Dante and Allison and Christopher. Triple equal signs they're true by language. They're true by definition. So they can't fall apart due to data. All right. So whenever I use that from now, that's what I mean. So like x equals 0, that's the equilibrium position for a spring. That by x equals 0, we just mean the place where the mass would be and will be if nothing else is pulling or pushing the mass. If you just place a mass at the edge of a spring, that's where you'll find the edge of the spring, and it'll sit there forever unless you move it. And where we're pulling the mass out at the beginning of this whole experiment of this problem, homework 1, where we hold it initially, we call the initial position, like where the mass is at. Let me be really specific. What x naught really means, just to be clear, I'm not saying you'd have to write all this in your homework. I'm just trying to back up now because we've never had physics together before, so I'm just making sure we're on the same page. What x naught really means by definition is x at time equals 0, right? That's what x naught means by definition. So what do we mean by time equals 0? What do we mean by time equals 0? Do we mean like the Big Bang or like the Garden of Eden? No, I mean, we don't mean time equals 0. What we really mean is when we started paying attention to the experiment, we really mean by time equals 0 when we started our stopwatch. And where did we start our stopwatch? When did we? Well, the assumption is that this mass actually was pulled out at some point and was let go and has been going back and forth for a while, like you did in lab. Like, we're trying to study patterns and principles here in physics. So the truth of the matter is, probably somebody got this mass going at some point. They pulled it out to a certain spot and they let it go and they waited till it got into a rhythm, into a reliable rhythm. And then at some moment after it achieved that rhythm, at some moment, as soon as the mass reached an end point, as soon as it slowed down in its rightward direction, and it momentarily stopped before going into its leftward direction, at that moment, we started our stopwatch. In other words, to be super clear, what I mean by initial position, really is x when the velocity is 0. I want to be the instantaneous velocity, not the average velocity, right? So that initial position is a place where the mass either was held initially or is momentarily stopping before it starts going in the other direction. That's what we mean by initial position, just to be clear. Okay, I'm looking in the chat. Okay. All right, so that's just a problem. And K, well, hold on. So hold on, let me finish this point. So we also know as given, so this is the setup of the problem, the defining things. Oh, sorry, someone's here. Okay. What we also know in this problem, though, they told us the numbers. They told us that, like, okay, in this case, K equals 200 newtons per meter. X naught equals 0.15 meters. I know we already used this info yesterday, but and K, we were told, M equals 0.3 kilohertz. Just for the record, just to clarify, notice those are double equal signs. These are all the facts of the problem going in, but those are double equal signs. We're just saying it happens in this case that K equals 200, blah, blah, blah. But as you're starting to see in lab, I think, those are just details, right? They're just to help us picture this spring more concretely, to picture it as though it were something we measured in the lab. But anything we're going to find out in this problem, we're going to find out about springs in general. So we don't really want to get too bogged down in the particularities of those numbers. They are just double equal signs. Okay. yesterday, I know we already solved question 1. I know we already said, let me just think for a second. Do I want to say, we have to move on to question 2, but okay, yeah, let's move on to question 2. So we did question 1 yesterday. I believe we got that F equals negative 30 newtons. So now question 2. Okay, question 2, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe question 2 is at x equals x naught. What is the instantaneous acceleration, right? Now notice it's asking for A. It's not asking for average A. It's not asking for A with a bar over it. It's asking for instantaneous acceleration. Like this is the kind of thing you would write in your homework. Again, I would encourage you, and I'm going to do it for a little while until we all get to, like, I'm going to just remind us here that, oh, sorry. Okay, I'll be even more careful. Pardon me for a second. Oh, no. Yeah, that's right. Everything I just did back here, this was all step 1, right? And again, you don't have to draw the diagram each time, but say something like see above for diagram, but there's all step 1, the diagram and the fact pattern, DFP. Okay, then now we're going to question 2. So I'm going to do step 2, what is the question? Again, you don't have to write out step 2, what is the question? But it certainly doesn't hurt, and it does help me see that you know, and I think it helps you ultimately. But anyway, so here's step 2, what is the question? And the question I accidentally erased, the question is at x equals x naught, what is A? Okay, so that's the question. So now notice, okay. So now step 3, GDP, general definition and principle, or general definitions or principles. So this tends to mean, now watch this now, step 3, and again, this all seems obvious, except it sort of isn't. Like you've been told since 7th grade to show your work, but the truth, and everybody hates doing that, but here I go. The idea of show your work, at least in my mind, for a lot of my life, I thought show your work meant write down everything that's known and then start plugging and chugging and find out what's unknown. But the whole thing is that gets you into trouble when problems are harder than we want. There's 2 types of knowns that never got distinguished for me when I was in 7th grade or 11th grade or undergrad, or I missed it undergrad. There's 2 ways to know things. You can know things because they are presented as particular facts and measurements of a particular problem, i.e., in effect, you saw them in the lab, or you're imagining that you saw them in the lab. That's one way to know things. But the other way is just to know general principles and definitions that are true in the universe even before you walked into the lab. In other words, there's double equal sign knowledge and there's triple equal sign knowledge. That's 2 different types of knowledge. And actually keeping it straight is a hugely helpful thing for getting toward things that you don't know. So in step 1, we wrote down some double equal stuff, like we wrote some particular knowledge. The thing is x naught equals 0.15, m equals 0.3, blah, blah, blah. Here's the setup. This is what I'm walking and looking at. But now in step 3, we're going to delineate, we're going to literally write down what's a law or a principle or a definition, something that's a little bit more triple equal-ish, something that is true even before I walked in the lab, but that's going to help me with this lab, right? So so one thing we wrote down yesterday, sure, yesterday we did write F equals KX, and that's still relevant and true. That's Hooke's law. Hooke's law for the specific, Hooke's law specifically for the elastic force or the spring force. Let's just get this straight. I know we used it already yesterday, and I know you learned it, most of you, in Physics 203. But what is F equals K negative Kx? And you could even argue that maybe that should be a triple equal sign. That's debatable. But whatever it is, F equals negative Kx, it is the law that says how, really in my heart, it is a triple equal sign. It's defining what it means to be an elastic force. It's not saying something about forces in general, but it's saying there's a particular force called the elastic force. And the way it works is that it is the elastic force exerted by a spring onto a mass at the edge of that spring. It's saying the elastic force is directly proportional to the displacement of the edge of that spring from equilibrium. It's saying the farther out you try to hold the edge of a spring, the more intensely the edge of the spring will pull, right? And I'm going to try to keep going on because I'm kind of assuming you already know that, but you should feel free in direct chat to stop me and say, I don't actually get that. I'm going to go on if you don't, because I kind of think a lot of you do get it, but there's no shame if you don't get it, because there's a lot more I could say about it if it's helpful. So if you don't think you're comfortable with Hooke's law, if you put it in the private chat, I won't shame you. And also, I may or may not say a lot right now. But I might just know that and realize I have to go slower with it later. Don't be afraid to put in the private chat that you don't understand F equals negative Kx. But if you don't, I'm going to keep going for a minute and say and you could do it anytime. You could do it anytime. You know, right now, I could even lie and say that someone did put in the direct chat and you'd never know, right? And then I could, but they didn't yet. Or did they? Okay. So that's F equals negative Kx. We used it yesterday. Granted, we just plugged in the math, but I hope we understood what we were doing physically. However, here, we're now getting to a more general law, right, that you know from Physics 203. Here, we're going to also say F equals ma. Now, right, that's obviously Newton's second law of motion. Now, let's be very clear. I mean, this is a very powerful law. Right now, at this moment, we all know I'm just going to plug in a couple of numbers. We're going to get a simple number. It's not hard math right now, but it's a very deep law. A lot comes out of it. And one thing to be clear about F net equals ma is this is a law about how forces work in general, right? This is not saying anything about any specific force. There's a sigma on the left side, or if depending on what school you went to, some people will write it like this. That's fine. Also, same thing. But there's something on the left side besides just the F. What we're saying in Newton's second law is if you add up all of the forces acting on a mass, you add them all up, taking into account direction, i.e. taking into account minus signs, so that this big addition of all the forces will actually end up looking like subtraction in some cases. You add up all the forces acting on a mass, you get the acceleration, the resulting instantaneous acceleration of that mass, right? This is a law about how all forces combine together to produce acceleration, right? In this case, so I'm going to pause right there. Well, I'm going to go one step further. I'm also putting arrows above the F's. Now, I'm just talking right now. I'm not saying you have to say all of this in your homework, but I'm using this as an excuse to just review certain concepts before we get crazy, and to review what I think is important about them. Because right now we're in step 3, general definitions and principles. So I'm dwelling on the general definition for a moment to make sure it's clear to all of us. One thing about the general definition or the general law, Newton's second law of motion, is it's F net equals ma, and there are vector symbols placed over the F and the A, right? What does that mean? It means direction really, really matters. It matters so much. I mean, it means that force is a vector quantity and acceleration is a vector quantity. They're not just raw magnitudes. They are magnitudes along with directions. Direction matters so much that it matters in more than one dimension simultaneously, right? The real thing about vectors, the real principle about vectors, is that any two-dimensional problem or any three-dimensional problem is really, in physics, understood at, well, I'll say it, a two-dimensional problem or a two-dimensional experiment is equivalent to and most analyzable as two one-dimensional problems that are occurring simultaneously yet independently. I'm going to say that one more time. I'm going to hope that anybody writes this down. I'm not going to write it because I'm going to get myself too bogged down. I'm going to say it one more time, and this would be an example too, where if you write this down and then you take a screenshot and like really show that you're like writing down things that I don't even write down, like then I love your karma and I give you major points. I'm going to say it again. The essence of vectors is that a two-dimensional problem in physics or a two-dimensional experiment is really two one-dimensional problems occurring simultaneously yet independently. That is a huge point. Put algebraically, what I'm saying is that whenever we say F net equals MA, that's a general point I'm making. I'm not saying it's going to throw off your answers for this problem right now. I'm just trying to teach because that's what I do. But I'm saying that whenever we say F net equals MA with vector symbols over, what we really mean is, or whenever we say, yeah, if I'm going to do, what we really mean is the sum of all the X forces produces the acceleration along the x-axis, while at the same time, but totally independently, all of the y forces produce the acceleration along the y-axis. That's what vectors mean. The x and the y-axis occur at the same time. It's stuff on the x and the y-axis occurs at the same time, but doesn't affect each other. It's like two physics problems, just two universes following their own laws, right? Okay, that's just a little review, whatever. Now, how does it all affect here now? Like, did you have to think about all of that in order to solve this problem? No, you didn't, because in this problem, there's only one force acting, and it's only acting in one dimension. I know that. So in this problem, to apply these general definitions and principles to this particular problem, we can now move to step 4. We can go to, you can still see it. Okay. Step 4, particular application and work, right? I'm trying to drag this out to get everybody on the page with me. We'll go faster and faster as the semester progresses, but I just also want you to see what the pattern here is. Well, yeah, one thing I want you to see is in step 3, you're setting up general truths. And especially if they're hard truths or new truths, or if they're like calculus truths, which they will be soon, then you may want to take a little time to like actually break down those truths and make sure you're clear on them and I'm clear on them in your writing. And so really in step 3, you're in triple equal sign land. You're like, what is true in the world that will be relevant here somehow? Then in step 4, you're now shrinking down and you're applying these truths that you already knew that were true even before you walked into the room of this problem. Now you're going to apply them to this problem. Please note the reason for that order, that you go step 3 and then step 4, which people tend not to do. I'm going to get to that too, but it all seems obvious until you realize that this is not what people do when they panic on exams. And that's why they do badly when they panic on exams. What we're saying here is always first write down something that's just true, period. Then try to make it relevant. Because the great advantage is, even if you don't have any idea what's going on in this problem, and I know I'm talking on and on about a problem that you all think is easy. I know that. But you wouldn't understand me if I were talking a problem that we thought was hard. I'm saying, notice that the thought process here, even if you didn't write any of this down, even if you just wrote the answer, right, and you were done with it, this must have happened in your brain to write down the answer. If you know that the answer to question 2, where am I going with all this? I think the answer to 2 is going to be negative 100 meters per second squared, right? So if you got that, yay, Quark, bless America, good job. But if you got that, even if you're thinking, I didn't do all this crap, I just knew the answer in my mind, but how did you know it? There's no way you could know negative 100 meters per second squared unless first you knew that F equals MA, and then you took the F of this problem and applied it to the M of this problem and got an A. Right? And got an A as a result, right? So those of you who think, I just know this, why is he making me drag this all out? You don't just know it, you know it very quickly. If you knew the answer to this is negative 100 meters per second squared, which it is, and which I'll eventually write down, I promise. If you know that the answer to this is negative 100 meters per second squared, that means your brain moved through a lot of steps really quickly. So you should be proud of yourself, but you should know your brain did move through a lot of steps really quickly. It didn't just jump to one, it didn't, negative 100 didn't come to it in a dream. Moses didn't tell it, to your brain. Your brain went through a series of steps. It went so fast that you don't want to dwell in them, maybe, depending on who you are, because they're boring. But those are you want to watch the movie of what your brain does when it knows stuff, so that you want to slow that movie down and watch it, so that you have a movie to run for yourself, to play for yourself when you don't know what to do. So the steps that we went through was we went to a general truth first, and then we applied it to the particular problem. The wonderful thing about doing that is when you write the general truth first, it has to be right. You still might not know what to do, but if it's true, it's true. So if it were on exam, it would get points, right? Because it's like true. F equals MA is freaking true, even if you don't know what to do with it. So you're getting points as you go. This is a way of just building correctness upon correctness until it lands on total correctness. Obviously, I'm going to keep going in a second. I know but word to the wise, or side note, when we panic on exams, all of us, certainly me, when I panic on exams and I don't know what to do, or I think I don't know what to do, and I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea, blah, blah, blah. The first thing that happens is, if I'm not careful, what I do when I panic is I try to write down a bunch of things that are relevant, that I think the professor wants, or that the question seems to sort of have to do with. I start writing down things that are relevant, that seem topical, and then I try to squeeze and manipulate them to make them true. Well, that's ass backwards. Like, no wonder I then mess up. You can't take things that are relevant and make them true. You can take things that are true and make them relevant. So that's the thought process here. Anyway, okay, I'm a little defensive. Am I a little defensive? I'm sorry. All right, so step 4, PAW. We now say, okay, what color are we? Black. We now say, okay, so here, F equals negative KX, and there's no other F. There's no other F, and it's purely one-dimensional, right? So, in other words, the net force is the spring force. By definition, if net force means add up all the forces, the only one is the spring force. So we can say KX equals MA in this case, right? We already got what negative KX was. Like, so here we know negative 30 equals MA, and M we know is 0.3. So negative 30 Newton, negative 30 newtons equals 0.3 kilograms times A, right? So, so A, so now this is step 5. I'm going to try to go faster off this. I know I'm dragging this out. Step 5, final answer circled. The final answer then is A equals negative 100 meters per second squared. So my final answer, right, notice it is a complete thought. It's A equals a certain number of meters per second squared, and it has a negative sign in it. And this relates, so I could, like, if I were grading your paper or whenever, I could like look at this. I see that the original question is, what is A? And to be more specific, at X equals X naught, right? So that's the final answer. It is negative. It is negative. Now and sometimes that confuses people. You're welcome to put something in the private chat if it confuses you that it's negative. Would I take off if you didn't have the negative there? Well, I would if you did have the negative in the answer for question 1, and really specifically what I should have done. I mean, this is all assuming if we say that X naught is positive 0.15 meters, if we're saying that the initial stretch of the string, if we're saying that the right side is positive, then this is, sorry, I'm just looking at, okay, then this answer is negative. It's accelerating to the left. And that does not mean it's slowing down. It means it's accelerating in the leftward direction. It's moving to the left while, while speeding up to the left, So again, don't be ashamed if you want to put in the private chat like that, you're bumping on that, please do. But if not, I'm going to move, and please do it anytime. I can go back, but yeah, that's the answer to that one. Okay, I'm gonna try to also, for the record, for people who are getting bored or annoyed, at a certain point in the semester, I'm not going to drag out all the steps every single time, and I'm not going to solve everything for you every time. I'm just trying to lay it all out now so we're all on the same page. We'll go faster and faster each day. But I believe that's the answer to that one. That's the instantaneous acceleration at the first spot. Okay, okay, I'm going to change the view of the screen for a second. I just want to make sure because I know I'm. Yeah, are we all still? Can I just get, even if you're bored, but which I apologize, but if you're still with me, if this is clear and you know where I am and what's going on, could you just give me an electronic hand or electronic thumbs up? Cool, that's fast. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Great. Oh, and I love those like animated ones. Okay, great. Thank you. That's good enough for me. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'll keep going. But again, please stop me at any time. Also, that's another portal too. You can in the private chat ask me to slow down, and you get points, even if I can't slow down, even for you just having the guts to ask, you get points for that. That's it's something like go back, please, or ask me even just to turn back a page in the notes. It's fine. But also in the private chat, you can say, could you please like get back to the topic and speed up or whatever. I mean, if you're polite about it, that's also fine. It helps everybody if I'm going, whatever. Okay. So those are two portals you can use. Now, Juliana, is your hand still up from a minute ago, or do you have a question? Okay, that answers that. Okay. Wait, is that hold on a minute. I got to see what Juliana's. Hold on. Wait, that's not a Pokemon, is it? Wait. There's got to be a portal. There's going to be a portal soon for if you. Oh, no, okay, it's not. But I mean, I'm not going to say that you get extra. Oh, it's still. Oh, got it. Got it. Awesome. And you are really, see, that really proves she's really listening to you too. Okay, cool. Very cool. Maybe there should be extra points for Stitch. There's definitely extra points for water type Pokemon, but okay, we'll talk about that. And even more for grass type, but okay, whatever. Okay. Question 3. Okay, so question 3 is, but that's awesome, truly. And thank you for paying attention. Oh, that counts, by the way. That portal that says for right or for wrong, she did just answer a question. She totally just answered a question about her avatar. And that counts because it shows she's paying. I'm not trying to be weird, but just so you know, she can submit that because it shows that she's like, oh, hey, wait, what am I? Oh, lightning. Wait, did someone just say something about lightning? Oh, I got to see this. Wait. No, I like lightning type too. That's cool. I mean, it depends if we're talking TCG or the video games. No. I mean, some of my best friends are Raichu. I mean, that's cool. That's cool. Don't get me started on Pokemon, yo. We'll do actually, but don't if you ever want me to get back to the topic. But I miss fairy type. Okay. Question 3. No, lightning is cool. Lightning is very cool. I mean, I call it electric, but whatever. Normal type is weird. Oh, sorry. I mean, that was in the direct chat. No, I mean, look, every EV evolution is. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm going to stop talking. I see what's going. Okay, but no, I mean, normal. I mean, normal type. I'm going to say.
Okay, we can have this discussion another time.
Yes.
We can debate about which is better.
Yes, you're right, and we will. Yes. Okay. I'll just say yes. I won't say anything. Okay. Question 3. Question 3. What is okay? At x equals 0, or at x equals 0. What is it? I believe this is a question. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, this is a question for, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to keep doing the steps. I'm going to stop writing out step 1, step 2, step 3 now. I hope, tell me in the chat if you don't know what step I'm on, but that, that's step 2. That's the question. Now, notice this, like the GDPs are the same. Like we're not introducing any new principles here. GDP is the same. F equals negative KX, sorry, and F net equals MA. But do notice an implication here now. this, because F equals negative kx, that means that A will be different at well, because F equals negative kx, because the force exerted by the spring is directly proportional to the displacement of the spring edge, then, and because F net equals ma, then that means that the acceleration is going to be different at different spots of this mass's motion. Now, that's very important. First of all, again, it reinforces that we are talking about instantaneous acceleration here, not average acceleration. So we, as I think someone even pointed out in the chat yesterday, we cannot use something like A equals V minus V naught over T. Like that is average acceleration, is defined to be change in velocity per time. That does not apply here. And furthermore, any of those equations from the beginning of physics 203, like x equals 1/2 at squared, all that stuff does not apply here, because the implication is, and you could write, if this were an exam or something like that, you could absolutely write implication or observation or remark or whatever, or note. You can say that all of the above GDPs implies that A does not equal A naught for a mass on a spring, right? The acceleration at any given place, moment, does not equal the initial acceleration. Important observation here, which means a lot of our equations and principles from the beginning of physics 203 go out the window. Kind of why we're studying this problem. It's a transition from physics 203 to physics 204. So, okay, but still, to actually get the answer, there's not a big deal. We can go to step 4. This is still question 3, continued. So at x equals, at x equals 0, F equals 0, right? Since F equals negative kx, at x equals 0, F equals 0. Okay, so I'm starting to go a little bit faster here. So at the equilibrium position, the acceleration is 0. Now, we're going to keep going in a second, but just note, some of you might find that number surprising. I mean, I think I did at first. But please remember, it doesn't mean the mass isn't moving. It means it's not accelerating, right? It means at that moment, it's not speeding up or slowing down. Because it's not being pulled or pushed at all. Very good. Wow. Yes, exactly. And that's such a good encapsulation of the 95 minutes that I was about to just say. That let's go with, yes, what Alexis just said, there's no restoring force at that place. Therefore, there's no change in velocity at that instant. Very perfect, Alexis. It's great. Definitely submit that somewhere in I'm still now looking at the chat. I'm stuck on the EV thing again. No, I love EV. Okay. Yes. No. Put that for points. Yes. Excellent point, Alexis. So I'm going to go on now. So question 4. Now things start to get a little bit more involved in question 4. Question 4 asks at x equals 0, what's the instantaneous speed or velocity? It asks for speed, I believe. Like I assume at this point, I mean, we're discussing like the first time it gets to the equilibrium position. So, you know, it's been released from over here, out here at 0.15 meters. Sorry, just changing the view. It's been released from out here. It's going. It's moving toward the equilibrium. It gets the equilibrium, and we're being asked at that moment, what is its speed? Presumably it's still going to the left. So if we're asked its velocity, it would have a negative sign on it, presumably, but we're being asked its speed. So we're looking for a number here. Now, note, and don't be ashamed if this throws you off, and also just don't take this for granted. Note, the assumption of this question is that the velocity is not 0, right? even though the spot that we're looking at and investigating is the equilibrium spot, there's something about this question that's implying that the thing is not going to come to rest or be at rest at the equilibrium spot. Now, let's just think about that for a second, because to some of us, that's slightly surprising, or maybe it reveals something. Like, people tend to think, I don't know if you are one of these people, but it's easy sometimes to think that equilibrium means place of no motion, equilibrium, balanced, like equilibrium is where I'm just sitting. But that's not actually what equilibrium means. Things can move quite rapidly through equilibrium. In fact, in a situation like this, as we're going to find, this mass will tend to have its maximum speed at equilibrium as it moves through equilibrium. So what's equilibrium about equilibrium then? What does equilibrium mean? No, oh, awesome. That is awesome, Evelyn. And you just saved me a lot of time in the class, a lot of heartache. Yes, awesome. Submit that in a million portals. Yes, equilibrium means that the forces are balanced, that there's no net force. Any force pushing this way is balanced by a force pushing that way, or there's no forces at all. Right, there's no net force at equilibrium. The definition of equilibrium, the definition of equilibrium is exactly what Evelyn's saying, that the net force is zero. Therefore, by definition of equilibrium, A is zero, but that means no speeding up, no slowing down. It doesn't mean no motion. In fact, what it means is if there is motion, there's going to continue to be a lot of motion, because nothing's going to instantaneously grind to a halt at equilibrium. Why? What it means is that if you equilibrium is the one place that if you placed something there, if it's already still, then it won't ever spontaneously start up. That's what's special about equilibrium. Equilibrium is the bottom of a hill as opposed to the top, right? You can be stationary at the top of a hill and you can be moving at the bottom of a hill. But the thing about a bottom of a hill is if you put something there, it ain't going to start going up. Whereas if you put something at the top of the hill, it can start going down, right? So equilibrium means not no V, it means no A. Very good, because no net F, as Evelyn said. Awesome. Okay. So what is the V here? Okay, I'm going to do it because I know some of you actually a lot of you solved this very well, which also tells me I think a lot of you, at least, I think a lot of you got a good background in energy conservation from HEMA, from Professor Walters, which is great. So I'll cut to the chase. Yeah, I mean, and then I may work backwards a little bit, but yes, for question 4, to get what the V is, well, okay, A doesn't equal A naught. So it's not the case that x equals 1/2 at squared plus v naught t. And it's not the case, it's not the case that v squared equals, what am I trying to say? Well, it's not the case that you can solve for v squared by doing one of those equations. Okay, just to be clear, we're going to shift gears here now. Like, we've been using kinematics up until this point. We've been using the topics from the first month or whatever of Physics 203 or Physics 1. We've been using the definitions of motion. Specifically, we've been using acceleration, velocity, those concepts. Now, we're going to shift gears. We have to go to a different physics model. We have to go to a different physics topic. The reason we have to go to a different topic now is that acceleration is not constant. And we're being, in other words, force, specifically, force is changing, not even just from time to time, but specifically from place to place. We have a position-dependent force here, right? We have a situation where, to be really specific, someone is saying to us, I know the speed over here at this spot. I need you to figure out the speed over here at a different spot. And you can't use kinematics because the force is literally varying continuously from the one spot to the other. Whenever you have that situation, I'm going to say it again. Whenever you have a situation where you know the speed at one spot, but you need to find out the speed at another spot. And by spot, I mean point in space, as opposed to point in time. If you know the speed at one point in space and you need to know the speed at another point in space, that is when we use the model, the topic of work and energy conservation, because work is force exerted from spot to spot, force exerted over space, through space. Okay, I'm saying that, and I'm going to move on. I promise I'm going to move on, but I'm saying it because I know you all learned energy conservation. You learned the equations and you learned the laws, and I think you did well. It seems like you did well looking at your work here. But from my experience as a student, I could do energy conservation and work stuff when people told me to solve a work problem or an energy problem. But as physics got more advanced, the thing I never knew is like, when do I use this? Like, how do I know when to use energy or when to use forces or when to use acceleration or whatever? And the more hard physics got, the more I realized that the hard part of physics is knowing what to use when, knowing how to set up the problem. Most of us actually, once the problem is set up, can sort of grind the crank and do the math. Most of us, if we've gotten this far in science already, which is why, ironically, math is not the hard part of physics. Actually, ironically, most of us end up using math as a crutch to a point to get through physics. But the hard part of physics for many of us, I'm sure some of you have noticed this, is actually knowing how to start, knowing how to set up, which is where the 5-step method comes in. So what I'm telling you right now is, how do you know when to use energy? Like, why in my solution to this, am I suddenly, like, how did I expect you to suddenly start using energy or work? Because the velocity, the speed is changing from spot to spot. The force is changing from spot to spot. We know the speed at one spot. We want to know the speed at another spot. That's when you use energy conservation. As opposed to, if you knew the speed at one time and you needed to know the speed at another time, then you would use momentum conservation. Like, it's that straightforward. But okay, so we're going to use, cool. Wait, I'm looking at the chat. Oh, well, look at that. I mean, she has me at brain jumps for joy every time. Cool. Great. I mean, my brain just jumped for joy because you just said that. So good. And so I won't beat the dead horse then. If you're good with, so I'm going to do the energy now. And again, like, not everybody's Evelyn, by the way. I'm psyched Evelyn's saying this, but some of you may not be as comfortable. I'm going to do it. You're going to tell me in the chat if you want, and I'm going to like unpack it more later. But cool. If maybe there are other people also like Evelyn that know this, then yeah. To cut to the chase, I'm going to say, okay. Well, to be specific, here's my GDP. Wait, are we in question 4? All right, I'm going to be specific because it starts getting. I'm going to say. This is step 3. GDP, general principles and definitions. Here's the general, oh yeah, no, and I'm with Alexis, and I appreciate Alexis's honesty. I'm with Alexis too. Like, when I start, after the first 3 problems of the sheet, and I'm getting all caught up in force and acceleration, I could easily forget. Like, if the first time I made up this sheet, but if someone gave me a sheet like this and I was doing okay in questions 1 through 3, I would freeze honestly, what I'd probably do in question 4 is I'd probably use one of those equations that I'm not allowed to use and I get it wrong. But then if someone said, no, you can't do that because the acceleration is not constant, I would probably freeze. I mean, the first time, energy wouldn't just leap to my mind. I don't think of energy until I'm thinking about energy. So I'm with Alexis on that. But that's why I'm telling everybody, the time to think of energy is when someone says the speed over here is blah. What's the speed over there? Like, as opposed to the speed at this time is blah. What's the speed at that? Okay, so thank you, Alexis, for your honesty, seriously, and also your participation. So put that in 85 portals. So I'm the GDP. Now let's be careful about this, because when it comes to energy, it's easy to just like copy and memorize equations and not know what they mean. The general principle here is, first in English, when all the forces doing work on a system or a particle or a mass or an object, whatever you want to say, but when all the forces doing work on a system are conservative, which is presumably something we're going to have to define if we haven't already, but I'm going to hold that for a second. When all the forces doing work on a system are conservative, then the total mechanical energy of the system is constant, conserved, constant, the same, right? But now here's a double star on that. There's a lot in this now. There's like a lot of words here. The overall thing I'm saying is, if you know that all the forces doing work on a system are, quote, conservative forces, then the system will conserve, will maintain a constant value for total mechanical energy. Now I have to define that also. I have to define what I mean by total mechanical energy. But before I even do any of that, let me just be clear about this constant word. When I say constant, because I know you all have maybe you do have an idea of what I mean by total mechanical energy. Maybe you do have an idea what I mean by conservative. But what I mean by constant is I mean constant from place to place. This is the whole thing about energy, is it's all a thing about comparing one position in space to another. I didn't know that until I knew that. Then the total mechanical energy of the system is constant, meaning, so double asterisk here, meaning doesn't change from position to position. Okay, so this is what, now of course I'm going to turn this into an algebra thing. I'm going to turn this into an equation in a second. But let's break it down a little bit more. If you were doing homework, or if this were an exam, the GDP for this, the step 3 is something like this. You could maybe skip straight to the equation form of this if you were very confident that you knew what the equation meant. But I'm writing it in English, so I'm not saying you have to write all of this stuff when you do an exam, but I am writing it for your benefit because I want it, because when it gets into energy, it gets very easy for people to accidentally memorize things that they think are universally true, but they aren't. So what's universally true, you'll see, is universally true is that as long as all the forces doing work on a system are conservative, then total mechanical energy is conserved. Now, first of all, here, the only force doing work is the spring force. Or the elastic force, whatever you want to say, the Hooke's law force. Okay, we're just going to zoom. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. We're just zooming in here, okay, from like out to in. So first of all, I'm saying I'm testing this situation. We only have one force doing work. That force is the spring force. I'm telling you, the spring force is, quote, a conservative force. I will break down why I'm saying that, what that means in a few minutes. But for the moment, just so we can zero in, the spring force is a conservative force. So this system does conserve energy. I mean, and this again, like at least one of you pointed out in your homework. I mean, I remember this. At least one of you pointed out, like, yeah, assuming there's no friction or anything else in the problem. That's right. I mean, if there were friction, this system would not conserve energy, but we weren't given a coefficient of friction. I think we were told there was no, so there isn't friction. So the only force is the spring force. So this system is conservative. I mean, so this system does conserve total mechanical energy. Now, so what does that mean? Like algebraically or in symbols. When I say that a system, well, what I mean by total mechanical energy, capital E, that is defined. This is still under step 3 here. Again, you might not write all of this stuff, but the more the merrier. What I mean by total, and of course, by the way, I'm doing this all now because it's the first time we're seeing this topic in this class. Obviously, from here on in, if we ever see another thing with energy again, I'm not going to write all of this again, and I'm not going to expect you to either. But let's make sure we're on the same page. Total mechanical energy, capital E, by definition means I should be even more clear. E at some position X, the total mechanical energy of a system at some place known as X is the sum of all the kinetic energy at that spot X plus all the potential energy at that spot X. Okay, the definition of mechanical energy is all the kinetic plus all the potential, as opposed to thermal, or as opposed to as opposed to thermal, as opposed to what else is? Well, as opposed to relativistic mass energy. I mean, there are other types of energy that we're not taught, but mechanical energy means all the kinetic and all the potential. Now, what does that mean? Well, this gets into issues. Kinetic, actually, before I get into that. So when we say that a system conserves total mechanical energy, what we're really saying is that at any spot over here, we're saying in this case, when the mass is over here, if you were to add up all the kinetic and the potential that it has over here at x naught at 0.15 meters, if you were to add up all the kinetic and all the potential that it has over here, you get a number of joules, and that number will be the same number that you'll get if you add up all the kinetic and potential energy at any other spot that the mass could ever be. That's what it means. It means it's staying the same from place to place. This sum is staying, right? And it goes back to your earliest examples of work and potential energy and stuff. Like if you drop something, then as it's falling, the sum of its kinetic energy and its gravitational potential energy, that sum is always the same. That's what the general definition principle is. Like, please note, if you're wondering, like, why am I, what I'm not saying is kinetic energy equals potential energy. Like, that's a thing that is somehow in a lot of people's minds. A lot of people somehow think like it's a formula or something like KE equals PE. That is not a thing. I mean, it is a common belief, but it's wrong. What's right is that the sum of kinetic plus potential over here must equal the sum of kinetic plus potential over anywhere else, if we're talking about a conservative system. So what we're really saying, if you want algebra, if you want equation this, we're saying so far, in other words, so here, in other words, well, okay, no, we're saying KE plus PE, like at some position called X naught, must be, at one position, like some known position, like X equals X naught, must be the same as the kinetic plus the potential at some unknown position or some position that we're solving for, such as X equals 0, for example, right? That's what we're saying. This is still a GDP. I mean, that, now we have to fill it in more. I don't have anything I can solve for here yet or anything like so. Let's look at the KE first. What is luckily, thankfully, a bit of a truism is that always, I'm going to just make it clear, this is still general truths here. Again, am I saying you had to write all of this in your homework? Not quite, but a lot of this, if you want to show that you know what's going on. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, fair. Hold on, saying in the direct chat. Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Yes, thank you. Someone is saying in the direct chat that I had asked you to remind me of something at 5:30. Thank you. Yes, I had said you could definitely remind me at 5:30 that I should take a break soon and shift over to the other homework because it might be, and so thank you. I think I'm gonna finish this question. And it's true, the material is about to get more thick. Like we're about to get into calculus and stuff now, which will be delightful to some of you and annoying to some of you. So I'm going to finish this part and then I'm going to just take your pulse and see. It might be a good time for us to shift gears and go to the other one. But if that'll confuse everybody and throw everybody off, we won't. I'll take your pulse. And so, but yes, thank you for reminding me. Okay, but I'm going to finish this part right here. So I'm still in step 3 GDP land. Again, I'm saying a little bit more than you might say in your homework. Again, like I warned you, I'm using homework 1. I'm using all these questions as an excuse kind of to get out on the table all the material or some of the fundamental pieces of material that we need for this course. So some of this is really boring review for some of you. Some of it is a reminder to some of you, like things that you are supposed to know that maybe you should like catch up on in private, right? And then some of this is my take on like my takeaway of like what the important things that we have to have taken away from physics 203. But technically this is all still like groundwork stuff that you know from 203. And I'm using these questions as just an excuse to review these things. So I'm expanding more, more rather than less. So, so please bear with me. So I'm still in the general definition and principle of step 3. I'm still trying to explain here what I feel is meant by energy conservation. So one thing is like, what the heck do I mean by KE? Okay, KE. Okay, the good news is KE is a memorizer. If you ever wanted just a straight up formula to memorize or to rely on, at least at this stage of physics, it is true that you can take to the bank that KE always equals 1 FMV squared. Either in a couple of minutes or in a day, I'm going to show you exactly where that came from. But yes, that will never fail you. In the kinetic energy of a mass is always 1/2 of the mass times the square of its speed. Notice it's a thing that is true at a point in space and a point in time. A mass has a certain amount of kinetic energy right here, right now. It may well have a different amount of kinetic energy in a moment or in another spot, right? But that is what kinetic energy always is. You can rely on that. I mean, always in classical physics. It's actually not true, if you want to know the truth. After Einstein and after 1905 in relativistic physics, it's not always true for what it's worth, but it's always true in classical physics. Okay, so that's what I mean by KE. I mean 1 FMV squared. But now, what do I mean by PE? Well, this is a bit of a discussion now. Let me think for a second how much. Okay. I'm going to set this up. We're now going to start getting into calculus. Again, it's going to make some of you happier and some of you less happy for the moment. But calculus is a big part of this course. And we're going to do a lot of calculus, and we're going to talk a lot about calculus. For the moment, let me just set up the deal and stay. And if some of you start getting mystified fast, just keep notes to yourself of what's going on. Like, I guess what I'm just trying to say is, whatever pace I go right now, it'll probably be too slow for some of you, and it'll be too fast for some of you. And there's no shame in either one. Just for right now, absorb what take note of what I'm saying. And if you think that you need to discuss further later, like you need me to go faster or slower, take a note of that. And there's going to be an opportunity for you to tell me in the direct chat or publicly. But here's what I think about potential energy and work and all this stuff. Whoops, sorry. I mean, potential energy is a big concept. Well, first of all, let me actually ask you quickly, at least those of you who had Professor Walters for 203, you did do potential energy in some kind of, tell me, like in the chat, in general, guys, you did potential energy in some kind of way or another in your last physics class. Is that correct? Like you've seen potential energy before.
So we've seen it, like if we did, what's that? The conservation of energy, that thingy, where you had to be, and the next thing is it equilibrium? No, momentum? Where Is that it? No, probably not. Somewhere like that. But we did see it.
You did see it. Okay. You saw it. Yeah, momentum is a thing, but it's a different thing. But okay, you saw it. And I do see that everybody responded in the chat too. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take, so you saw it. That's good. Well, I'm going to ask one last question. When you think of it, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to show you what I think of it. I think it's a big concept. I think we have to kind of back up on it a little bit. Because I think it gets us into calculus now. But okay, so you've seen it. That's good. Here's what I think. Okay. First, let me say, potential energy only applies, the concept of potential energy, of storing energy, only applies to forces that we call conservative. There is, I'm saying this to everybody in general, the concept of potential energy applies to gravity. It applies to elastic forces, spring forces. It applies to electrostatic forces, which we come up in this course, which will be a big thing in this course. But it doesn't apply to friction, and it doesn't apply to the normal force, and it doesn't apply to tension forces. The tension forces don't store energy. Normal forces don't store energy. Friction forces don't store energy. The only kind of forces that so to speak, store energy are conservative forces. So what do I mean by a conservative force? Well, what I mean in English, hello, wait, so we're just gonna remember. Okay, what I mean, well, this always happens. The most important things I ever have to say always get squeezed right at the bottom of notes. I'm going to recopy this on the next page in a second. I'm just going to read it. So in English now, what a conservative force is a force that does no network around any closed path, around any round trip. In English, what a conservative force is a force that does a total of zero work as it pushes you in one direction and then back to where you started. That's in English. Now, first of all, but we need it mathematically here. So this brings up the issue mathematically of what work is in the first place, because all this energy stuff is all ultimately, you might recall from physics 203, it's all ultimately tied to work. So let me get mathematical now. And again, this is all, everything I'm saying now is in principle under step 3 GDP. These are all general concepts and principles that I'm trying to break down so that we understand how to use energy conservation for this problem. Again, if you were doing your homework for me, I'm not expecting you to give me 50 pages like this. I'm using this part of the homework as an excuse to reteach or to review something for everybody. Okay, you don't have to write all of this in your homework, but you could. I mean, and it's all relevant. And I'll also say, because I know this drives some people crazy, because I know I'm dragging this out and all that, for what it's worth, the answer that we're going to get eventually, for what it's worth, the answer we're going to get is 3.87 meters per second. Like the answer we're going to get, because I'm not trying to play hide the ball, the answer we're going to get for how fast this thing is going by the time it reaches equilibrium is V equals 3.87. So if you got that, and if you got it in like 2 lines, good, like yay, like I'm psyched. But then don't think to yourself, please, the reason I'm saying that now is to cut the suspense and cut the hide the ball. If you got 3.87, but you got it in 2 lines, that first of all, you still might be getting full credit. That's fine. Like you're a good person. But what I'm saying is now that you know you got the right answer and you're good to go, don't now think, well, I don't have to listen to this because I already got it like a faster way and he's just spinning his wheels and he's a crazy person. If you already got the right answer and you know you're chill and you already know something about basics, now sit back and relax and take this as an opportunity for me to review or explain to you some big fundamental calculus concepts that may or may not that you are going to need for the rest of this course. Okay, if you got the right answer, it's all the more reason you can listen now and you can be relaxed about it and not stressed. If you didn't get the right answer, you definitely want to listen. Okay, but I'm serious because I know people think like, oh, I've already know this, so I'm gonna, but you got it. You with? Okay, so here we go. What is work? Work is defined. Work is defined. The work done from one position x1 to another position x2. Oh, hello. It's the work done by some force as it pushes or pulls an object or system from one position x1 to another position x2 is defined to be the dot product of that force vector. Oh, excuse me. It's defined to be the integral from position x1 to position x2, the integral of the dot product of the force vector, the relevant force vector that's doing the work, with the infinitesimal displacement vector. Okay, there's a triple equal sign. And this is for all of you now, because we do need to now get into integrals and stuff like that in this class. So you may have seen this before, and maybe I'm showing you to again, or maybe you haven't, or whatever, but I'm saying for starters, technically speaking, work is what's known as the path integral of force. It is the integral of force acting over some path of displacement. Force is measured in newtons and path. Displacement is measured in meters, right? So strictly speaking, work is an integral. Now, I am going to unpack. I know, no matter who you are in this class, I know people are at various levels of comfort with integrals. We're going to unpack integrals and we're going to backtrack on them. We are, but I'm always trying to like zoom in here. So first, I don't want to like throw anybody. So first, I'm just saying that this is the case. And you'll be increasingly honest with me about how much more you need to see about integrals and stuff like that. And we will, but so that I don't lose anybody right now, and so that I do go to the other homework. First of all, I'm saying this is true, that work is defined to be the integral of what's known as a dot product. A dot product is a specific type of product between two vectors. Some of you have seen that in some math classes, some of you haven't. We're going to review it and talk about it. It's in the math methods homework number 2 that's due next Monday. But there's other ways you can multiply two vectors. There's a thing called a cross product, which would be designated with an X rather than a dot. Okay, so this is a very specific type of product between two vectors. I'll be a little bit more specific right now. I'll say that means what the dot, well, okay, actually, sorry. Just as a quick thing, and you'll see this in homework 2. What do I mean by a dot product between two vectors? Okay, as a quick shorthand, just so you're with me. And if you go back to old playlists of mine from like the first year of COVID or something like that, you know, whatever, 2020, if you care, if you want to at any point, I have like long videos on just this, if you care, if you want, where I like painstakingly go through what the dot product is and how it works and what the cross product is and how it works. And we will do more of the details here, but just as a quick overview right now, a dot product between two vectors is a way of multiplying two vectors that yields a non-vector, a scalar answer. So if you have two vectors, any two vectors, vector A and vector B, and they're separated by an angle theta, right? Right? The dot product of those two vectors is the magnitude of one vector, just the length of it, times the magnitude of the other vector, times the cosine of the angle between them. Now, Like why? What the heck? What? Now, and again, you might not know you might not know about dot products. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you might recognize from Hema, from Professor Walters, you might recognize that when you were, or from another physics class, that when you were calculating work in the first case in your life, when you did work and you sort of multiplied force by displacement, but often if the force and the displacement were at different directions, you would really multiply the force times the displacement by the cosine of the angle between them. Like some of you may be familiar with that. Why? Because cosine is like a scaling factor, or like a percentage, a register, an indication of how parallel, to what extent two vectors are parallel. That is to say, and I'm saying this quickly again, just bear with me. Remember always in life, the sine, actually, okay, participation moment. Just tell me in the chat, what is the sine? It sounds like a digression, but it's not. What is the sine of 0? Just in general, in life, what's the sine of 0? Put it in the chat, please. And it's not a race.
Yeah.
Awesome. But he's not the only one. Like, he gets credit, but anybody who puts in the chat will get credit for this. Honestly, what's a sine of 0? Anybody, even though he already said it. I don't know, because you'll even just prove you were paying attention. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Toiba. Thank you, Juliana. Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Bree. All of you who just put that in, you submit that for points, like for real. Thank you. I see the direct chat. Good. Thanks. And I don't care that one of you did it first, even if those of you who are copying off each other, you're at least paying attention. Okay, yeah, the sine of 0, 0, that's a memorizer. Oh, that's the easiest one to remember. Like sine super, cosine crappy. What do I mean? Because everybody like knows their unit circle and stuff, but they always get confused which one is which. Sine of 0 is 0. It's all S's. The sine is super. It's a function that works the way you would like if you invented functions, right? When the angle is 0, the sine is 0. And as the angle gets bigger and bigger, the sine gets bigger. It's super. It's exactly what you want. Cosine is crappy. Cosine, is counterintuitive. The cosine of 0 is 1. What? And then as the angle gets bigger and bigger, the cosine gets smaller, right? Or you could say cosine is confusing, if you like. Sine is super, cosine is confusing. Why am I bringing this up? Because cosine is the one. If you think about it, cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of 90 degrees is 0. Cosine is a measurement of how parallel two things are. If two vectors are perfectly parallel, their dot product is the length of one times the length of the other times 1. It's the full product of both those vectors. So like if I'm pushing a box across a floor, right? Well, so here, let me just write this down. So therefore, what I'm saying here is when you're talking about work, just the part inside the integral, I'm just trying to break down what that dot product means. I'm just trying to remind you, right? Whether this is review or new or whatever, I'm saying work. I'm talking about work here. Work is some kind of integral. And again, I know some of you don't understand integrals. Some of you know that you don't understand integrals. Some of you think you understand integrals and don't. Some of you totally do. I get, but we're all over the map with integrals. Some of you know how to do them, but you have no idea what they mean. That was me for most of my life. All right. So, but ignore the integral for the moment. Right now, I'm looking at the part inside. I'm saying what's inside is force dotted with infinitesimal displacement vector. Just look at that for a minute. What that means is, my dog is going crazy, and I can't tell if it's just because I'm yelling so much that I'm freaking out the dog. It's possible. Or it's possible that the dog is really excited about integrals. I mean, I would make me happy. Okay. What I'm saying is, by definition, work is the integral, whatever that means, of force times displacement times cosine of the angle between them. That means, like, the reason for the dot product, the reason for the cosine is that we're saying is only the part of the force, only the component of the force that is actually lined up with the displacement is actually affecting the displacement. Only the component of the force that is along the same axis as the motion is relevant to the motion. So if there were a box on the floor and I was pushing and I pushed the box 5 meters along the floor, well, if I crouched down and pushed at the box, like I pushed in a purely horizontal fashion, and I pushed with 5 newtons of force throughout that entire 3 meters of displacement, then yes, every Newton, every micronewton, every bit of my exertion is going directly into the motion that I'm trying to achieve. So 5 newtons times 3 meters is 5 newtons of force times 3 meters of displacement would equal 15 joules of work that I'm doing, right? But if I'm pushing at an angle, if the box is moving horizontally, but I'm pushing at an angle, if I'm pushing somewhat over and somewhat down, the part that I'm pushing down is not helping the box displace. It's totally irrelevant to it. So it's only the cosine component of what I'm pushing, of how I'm exerting a force that's relevant to the displacement. So put another way, if I multiply my force magnitude times the displacement magnitude and then multiply by the cosine of the angle between them, cosine's always a number between 0 and 1, right? It's always like a fraction, a percentage, a decimal. The higher, the more parallel the two vectors are, the closer I'm pushing to purely the direction of displacement, the higher that percentage, that cosine is going to be. If I'm pushing directly along it, then the angle is 0, the cosine will be 1. If I'm pushing directly perpendicular to the motion, then no matter how hard I'm pushing, no matter how far it goes, put it this way, a classic example, like right now, this can of soda, can you see it? Yeah, this can of soda is like going across the screen, right? And it's doing, I'm exerting force on, I'm doing work, but as it's going across the screen, gravity is pulling down on the can of soda. Like the can of soda has a lot of weight. mg is pulling down. mg is a huge force. And this thing is displacing a huge amount. Well, that's weird. Sorry, I'm disappearing. So mg is a huge force. The displacement is huge. But mg is on the y-axis and the displacement's on the x-axis. Even though the mg force is huge, we don't want to say that mg is doing any work. It has not on the object. It has nothing to do with why the object is being displaced horizontally. Gravity is not transferring any energy to the object while it goes to the left. So it would be like mg force times displacement times cosine of the angle between them. The angle between them is 90 degrees. The cosine is 0. So there'd be no work done by gravity, right? That's my long explanation of just saying, first of all, what work in general is the integral of a dot product between two vectors. Dot product means the scalar product of the one of the vectors times the component of the other that is parallel to the first. It's a measurement of how parallel the two forces are. Perpendicular forces do not do work on each other. Or I mean, forces that are perpendicular to displacement do not do work. Okay, that's beat number 1. So that's just a quick explanation of what I mean by the dot product. Dot product means vector magnitude times cosine of angle between them. Now, then I have to get to the integral part now. Let me just think for a second. We're going to pause on that for a second. So work, I'm saying again, work by definition equals the integral of the dot product of a force vector with a displacement vector. Strictly speaking, work is the path integral of force. That's technically a path integral is an integral of a dot product over space. But now, again, I'm going to define integrals more specifically for all of you. I'm going to break down integrals, whether you want me to or not, but I'm not going to right now. What I'm going to say right now, I'm going to trust that you've all seen integrals. Let me say again, you've all seen integrals. I think you all have different relationships with integrals. We're going to try to improve that relationship soon, but you've seen them enough that I'm going to ask you. Oh yeah. Thank you, Valentina. You've seen them enough that I'm going to leave it as an integral for the moment and just say this so I can make some tracks here. I'm going to say that the definition and look, in quick terms, an integral is a continuous sum. The integral of the force times displacement means the sum of the integral means force times displacement for this little bit plus force times displacement for the next little bit plus force times displacement of the next little bit of displacement. So the force times the total work from here all the way to there is an integral, meaning it's the force times the displacement from here to here, plus the force times displacement from here to here, plus the force times displacement from here to here, all the way to the end. That really what integral means is add up all of the products from beginning all the way to the end of the total displacement. I mean, in general, an integral is a continuous sum. We'll get more into that, but that said, I'm going to say to define a conservative force, I'm going to say this. If we let FC stand for conservative force, then mathematically, I'm going to say from here on in, a conservative force, it means this. Yeah, I'm going to put this on the next page. This always happens. The most important things I have to say always get squeezed at the bottom. You're not going to be able to read it. Hold on. So I'm just going to say, here's what a closed integral. So, well, let me back up for a second. And we are going to take a pause here. And I know I still haven't answered the question, but the answer to the question is 3.87 meters per second. But what I'm trying to say right now is energy conservation applies when all the forces doing work are conservative. A force is conservative if the work it does over a closed path is necessarily zero. And this can be understood mathematically. Since work is the integral of force with respect to displacement, the work done over a closed path can be expressed mathematically as the closed path integral of force. A closed path integral is a round trip integral. I'm saying this. So now I'm saying in general, notice I'm about to shift into math language here because I'm saying something that's true in general about math. This is a piece of notation. Like some of you have learned this in math classes, but most of you have not. But I'm saying this is the kind of thing that could come up just in a regular math class, that this symbol, an integral symbol with a circle around it, means when it's applied to any function, it means, I'm doing it again, making it too, I'm not changing it. If you already wrote it, I'm not changing it. I'm just moving it over. It means the integral from one spot to another plus the integral from that spot back to the original spot. It's a round trip. A closed path integral means integrate, 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 and then come back and integrate to where you started from. It is,
Question.
oh yeah.
Wouldn't we switch the x's, or it just they're both stay x1 at the first interval and then x2? Wouldn't they be interchanged? Like,
Wait, I'm not sure what, wait, I'm saying, I mean, it's a good question, but I might not be understanding it.
okay, so the first one, you have your integral sign going from x1 to x2, but if we're going back from x2 to x1, would it be the other way around for the next one?
Oh God,
Like,
oh yes, oh, I totally made a typo. Oh, gee, I was like, wait, is he getting deep? You're totally right. I got so deep that I didn't even know yes, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Thank
okay.
you. Yeah. You're totally good observation. Yes, and we have to open up a portal for that. Yeah. So, and then also, let me back up for a second. I see Samantha's question in the chat. Yeah, so the C, but so I want to back up and then I want to answer that thing again from Christopher. First of all, what Samantha is saying, yes, from here on in, if I put a C, like a subscript under like a force vector, yes, I'm saying it means conservative force, right? And so right now, oddly, what I'm trying to do is define what I mean by a conservative force, but I'm defining it in a funny way. Like instead of saying FC equals blah, 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 because I can't really do that. I'm saying a conservative force is one for which when you integrate it over displacement from here to there, and then you integrate back the other way, you get zero. Like, so yes, I mean, so the answer to Samantha's question is yes, the C means conservative. And the thing that I'm saying to everybody is I'm trying to define here mathematically now, like you've heard of conservative forces before, you've heard of conservation of energy, like in physics 2, but now we're trying to we're trying to really think of it in calculus terms now in this course. What it really means to be a conservative force is if we remember that to do work is to integrate a force over displacement. And again, I know that lands with some of you and it doesn't land with others. Just we're at 5, we'll zero in. But work is the integral of force with respect to displacement. In general, it is. Like work is the continuous sum of a bunch of products of force times displacement, pushing a little bit here, plus pushing a little bit there, plus pushing a little bit there, plus pushing. If you add up all those products, the push times the displacement, the push times the displacement, the push times, you add them all up, you get work. I'm even going to do a sidebar on that for a second. No, I'm not. So you add them all up, you get work. Now, then what I'm saying is, okay, you usually get a number of joules when you integrate the force throughout some displacement, when you multiply force times displacement for some large displacement, you get a number of joules. Now I'm going to say, and it's not usually zero. I mean, it's not usually zero. But now I'm going to say in some circumstances, if you do that integral in one direction, and then you do it back in the other direction, in some circumstances, you'll get zero every time. And in some circumstances, you won't. The circumstances that you do, we call conservative forces. The circumstances that you don't, we call non-conservative forces. Now I'm going to hang on this so just to be clear also, like Christopher's observation, just so that, well, actually I'm going to ask because it's important. I did make a typo that he noticed. And like, if you didn't catch that, can you just raise your hand if you caught that we corrected the typo of the limits on integration? Thank you, Bree. Okay, thank you, Sade. Thank you, Juliana. Okay, just to make sure, because you don't want to have that wrong in your notes. Okay, so cool. So that was totally typo. Christopher caught it. So what we're saying now, but if you're looking at it now on the piece of paper, and I will wrap up, I'd like to at least get this to a point where I get you an answer so you're not like all confused when you leave today, but then, we'll shift gears. Like someone reminded me, we'll go back to homework 1. But look, if you're looking at what I'm writing right now, and again, look at it knowing, I know that for some of you, the minute you see an integral sign, you want to puke. I know that. the goal by the end of this course is not to want to puke by the time you see an integral sign. But even if you want to puke now, right now, just bracket it in your mind. Just think of the integral as it's just saying sum, like SUM, right? So what I'm saying right now is there's a, when you integrate from here to there, it's called a definite integral. When you integrate from a specific spot on the x-axis to another specific spot, that's called a definite integral. You get an actual numerical answer for that. You don't just get some general function, right? Well, now I'm defining for you a new piece of notation that you might not have seen before. There's a kind of definite integral called a closed integral. A closed integral is definite. And definite integrals are always from a boundary to another boundary, right? Well, a closed integral is an integral from a boundary back to the same boundary. It's a round trip. Now, here's the thing. That's why I wrote it like as the sum of x1 to x2 plus x2 to x1. But you might think, if you're still with me here, and if you're still paying attention and trying to make sense of this, especially if you've never seen this closed business before, you might very well think to yourself, well, wait a second. Okay, like now that Christopher corrected that, and now that like he's saying that, that's fine, but like, shouldn't that always be zero? I mean, if you go there and then you come back, like, don't you necessarily unwind what you wound? Like, duh, like the way I'm writing it, it might make it seem to you like mathematically this should always be zero. And if you're thinking that, that does mean you're paying attention. If you're thinking, wait, I sort of get what Yavrom's saying, but I sort of don't, because I sort of don't know why everything wouldn't be zero. You're totally with me. That's a good, oh, wait, okay, wait. Hold on. Let me just, yeah. Wait, Pinina, yeah. All of this is being recorded. This will be, yesterday's lecture was all recorded and was posted. Hopefully someone can verify, but it was posted to YouTube last night. This is all, yes, okay, thank you, Allison. So yeah. And I'm glad someone's asking that. That means to me that maybe the material is just starting to get just thick enough for some people that you may want to check this out again. Good, yes. Like now we're starting to get our money's worth, maybe. Yes, all this is recorded. All this will be on YouTube tonight. And yes. Oh, cool, even better. Thank you, Samantha. Awesome. And thank you, Key. And you guys can submit in the portals for extra point. Awesome. So let me say this, because this is a new concept and it does involve integrals and blah, blah, blah. Let me just say something physical about this. If you think about it, let's think first about gravity, okay? Gravity, if you, also, thank you, Mario. And I love when people do this. Again, when anybody says something in the chat, you can all echo. It's not a race. So yeah, if 3 people just said the same thing in the chat, you can all get points for saying that. That's awesome. Also, okay, and thank you, Dante. I totally appreciate your honesty. No, cool. Awesome. Okay. The other thing is, believe me, we're going to break down integrals more. But if you're one of the people that's slightly bumping on integrals right now, one thing also to remember about integrals, remember the whole thing from math that constants come out of the integrals, whatever that means, right? But what does that mean to us? It means every time I say integral, I'm saying it to take care of the strong possibility that a force might change from spot to spot, which it does in the case of a spring. And that's why we really do have to take the integral seriously. But if you're trying to picture things step by step with me, if I write that work is the integral of force times displacement, the reason we're saying integral is we're acknowledging we're trying to be as general as possible. We're trying to acknowledge the fact that the force might be one thing over here at this point in space, and then it might be another value over here at this point in space. We're acknowledging that the force may vary as a function of position. So that's why we have to say integral. But if the force didn't vary at all, if the force were a constant, it would come out of the integral, if you recall, right? Which is just another way of saying, look, when we say the integral of force times displacement, we're really just saying force times displacement. We're saying, as you might have learned in Physics 203, we're saying work, if you were to picture work, picture it as how hard you push something times how far it goes. That is what we're saying. We're saying work is force times displacement. But we have to say truthfully that it's an integral because we have to tell because if the force is changing at every place in the displacement, what number do we pick? There's not just one force. So we do this thing called integral to acknowledge that fact. But in general terms, if right now you just want to be comfortable with what I'm talking about, every time I say integral of force times displacement, in general, I mean force times displacement. So think about gravity for a second. If you want to break down what we mean by conservative versus non-conservative, think about gravity for a second. If I throw something up and then it falls down, right? I mean, I'm not going to do it in front, but I'm also going to change my view. Hold on. So if I've taken an object and I throw it up a height 8, so I take an object mass m and I throw it up. So I throw it up, so it goes up to height h, and then it starts falling down back to the ground to height 0 again, right? Okay, on the way up, the force is pointing down, the displacement is up. Like on the way up, the displacement, let's say, is positive, the force is negative. The force is negative mg, right? Mg, the force is constant. It's not changing from spot to spot. So the force can come out of the integral. So you don't have to get bogged down in the integral thing for the moment, right? Just think of this example. If I throw something up, while it's going up, gravity is doing work, negative mg times positive h. So on the way up, gravity is doing negative work on the object, right? It's doing negative work while the thing is going up. So gravity is taking kinetic energy away from the object on the way up. It's doing negative work. It's slowing the object down. Like, duh, the object is slowing down as it goes up, right? Then the object gets to the top, to height h. Now it starts falling down. So now it's falling down. So now it's displacing down. So now h is negative, right? Now it's going down in the negative direction. So its displacement is negative. The force is still mg pointing down. So as the thing is falling down now, the force is negative mg times negative h. A negative times a negative, making a positive, right? Let me say that again. On the way up, the work was a negative times a positive. The work was negative. The thing was slowing down. Then it starts coming down. Now the force and the displacement are agreeing with each other. They're aligned. The cosine is 0, not 1. I mean, the angle is 0, not 180. The cosine is 1, not negative 1 on the way down, right? So on the way down, the work is positive. Of course, the thing is gaining energy, it's speeding up. So when you throw something, if you allow something to undergo a round trip under the influence of gravity, gravity will do negative mgh on the way up, and it'll do positive mgh on the way down. The total amount of work that gravity will do for the whole round trip is negative blah plus positive blah equaling 0. Now stay with me for a minute, and we will stop shortly, but stay with me. This is the way physics always is. Hopefully some of you are thinking like, yeah, all right, yeah, but now that he's breaking that down, it seems so obvious, I don't even understand what the point is. Like you might be thinking, I get it so much, I don't even know why he's saying this. Because gravity does that. Gravity does negative work and then the exact same amount of positive work on the way down. So for the whole round trip, gravity doesn't do anything to you on balance, right? It takes away, it slows you down, then it speeds you up by the exact same amount. The total net work done by gravity over a round trip, over a closed path, is 0. Contrast that now with friction. I mean, it all seems very easy, right? Maybe it all seems straightforward, like duh. It almost seems like I'm just speaking in definitions or math, but I'm not. I'm talking about physics, because if you do the exact same example with friction, push something out like along the table, the friction for, like if I'm sliding a box of like the can of soda along the table, right, for a displacement of x, as the thing's going out, friction is pointing in, right? If the thing is going out, I mean, you could also do the example with my hand, but let's talk about the friction. As the thing is going out, friction is pointing in, right? So call the friction force F, call the displacement X. As the thing is displacing positively X, the friction is negative F, right? It's definitely against it, definitely slowing it down. So on the way out, the work done by friction is negative F times positive X, negative times a positive, negative work, slowing down, decreasing kinetic energy, right? But now if the thing turns around and comes back for whatever reason, like it does automatically or not, like even if I'm pulling it back, if we now look at what the friction does on the way back, now the thing is displacing in, the thing is now moving negatively, but friction has to flip. Friction's always going against the thing's motion. Friction's different from gravity. Gravity is always pulling down no matter what. It doesn't care what you're doing. But friction's always pointing against you. It's not always pulling down or left or in. It's always pushing against the velocity of something. So on the way back in, the displacement is now negative, but the friction force is positive. So on the way back in again, we get negative times positive. We get negative work again, i.e. on the way out, friction slowing the thing down. On the way back, friction slowing the thing down. Friction doesn't give back what it took. It just takes more, right? So it's the same math concept. I mean, we're applying the same thing of what's the integral over a round trip, but for certain forces that are always pointing towards some equilibrium position, like gravity or like the spring force, certain forces will necessarily give back what they took for whatever reason, and they'll yield a network of zero around a round trip. Other forces, same math, same application, other forces will not. So this distinction ends up meaning something. I mean, so I'm saying from now on in, any force that does this, any force that does zero work around a round trip is known as a conservative force. That includes specifically the elastic force, the gravitational force, and you'll see soon the electrostatic force. They all do a total amount of zero work over a round trip. What does any, so that's like a long, I just went on a long thing, right? What does that have to do with anything? I'll try to rein it in now, wrap it up, and then we'll, go to the other sheet. What that all has to do with. Okay, now again, at some point, like tomorrow, I'm going to say more about integrals in general, whether you want me to or not. But it might be a good idea for any of you. The integrals are going to come up a lot in this class. So if any of you wants tonight or something to take a little side journey to a Khan Academy video on integrals, or to any, I mean, I really do unpack them on a lot of my old videos. You can look at those. But like, if you want to refresh yourself on integrals, that could only be helpful. Just saying, okay? But I will say, but what I think an integral is a continuous sum of products, okay? And if work is the continuous sum of force displacement products, right? And every time I say continuous sum, I mean adding up force times displacement here, plus adding up force times displacement there, plus adding up force times displacement there. And all of the adding up is unnecessary, and it's unnecessary and irrelevant. If the force amount for each one of those displacements is the same, then you can just factor it out, right? Like Yeah, I'm over explaining this right now. But anyway, integral is the continuous sum of all those products. We only need it. It only matters when the value of the product is changing every step along the way. But if work is the integral of force from one position over here to another position over there, then, and if a conservative force is a force for which the closed path integral always yields net zero, right? And that's what I'm saying so far. Work is the path integral of force. A conservative force is a force for which the closed path integral is always zero. If that is the case, then from here on in, we can say that the work that a conservative force would do to bring an object from some position, call it X naught, back to some position called X equals zero, right? Let me be very clear here. Let me be clearer. In fact, let me back up for a second. Notice the conservative forces, the ones that do zero work around a closed path, like unlike friction, unlike normal force, unlike tension, the forces that do zero work around a closed path, they always tend to be forces that are associated with some kind of equilibrium position. That's not a definition, that's just like an observation. Like gravity always wants to bring everything to the ground, like to the lowest vertical place. Springs always want to bring everything to the middle, right? Protons always want to bring electrons toward them. Conservative forces are the ones where they sort of are always trying to pull or push something to a particular spot. And they're not looking at velocity. They're looking at, are you at that spot or not? Right? Gravity is always pulling down. Spring force is always pulling in, whatever. So the amount of work that a conservative force would do to bring an object in from some arbitrary location, call it X equals X naught, to the preferred equilibrium location of X equals zero, the amount of work that a conservative force would do to restore an object to equilibrium is what we mean by potential energy. I'm going to say that one more time, or a different way. Potential energy is the amount, back up, hold on, I got to, to make this really make sense, I sort of neglected to say one thing that I think you do know, but all of this is assuming, sorry. Okay, I'm backing up for a second. I apologize. It's something that I know you've learned before, but let me establish it right now. Everything I'm writing on this piece of paper right now are double equal signs, not triple equal signs. So let me slow this down for a second. I will shift gears soon and get, for 15 minutes or so, I'll get to the other sheet. We will, and again, by the way, we're covering, this is, I don't know how you feel about this, but we actually are making a lot of progress here, in some ways more than we often do on the second day of a 5-week course, for what it's worth. Like, and you're all being very patient. And I'm expecting still that if I've lost anybody, you would let me know in the chat. But anyway, what work is the integral of force with respect to displacement. What work it means is how hard you push something through space. But who cares? Like, why do we care about all this? And because what work does, so what work is triple equal sign. What work does, double equal sign, is it transfers what we call energy. What work does, when I push something through space, I change the amount of kinetic energy that thing has. I ultimately change the amount of 1 FMV squared it has. Now, what does that mean? What's energy? Well, this is going to sound circular to you, but what energy is the ability to do work. Work is the transfer of energy. Energy is the ability to do work. Specifically, kinetic energy is the ability to do work by virtue of motion. Now, that sounds like a circle. It is a circle. Work is the transfer of energy. When I do 3 joules of work on a box, I give the box 3 joules of kinetic energy. If I do 3 joules of positive work on a box, I give the box 3 joules of kinetic energy. What's kinetic energy? It's the ability of that box to do work on something else. Is that a circle? Yes, but does it mean nothing? No, it means something. It's just like economics, and I'm not kidding. It's just like transaction. A transaction, an economic transaction, is the transfer of money from one party to another. What's money? The ability to do a transaction, right? Like, what does it mean to spend? It means for me to give you money and get something in return. Why do I want money? Because it's an ability, so I have the ability to spend and get crap, right? It is circular. But it's ultimately not circular because of the idea that trades can happen. I can give you money in one form, shekels, for some other commodity that's equal apparently in value, but of a different form, like food. Like right now, I have a lot of shekels and I don't have a lot of food. You have a lot of food, you don't have a lot of shekels. 3 shekels equals 1 hamburger. They're equal in value, but they're different forms. So we make a trade. Right? And everybody benefited somehow or something. Same thing with energy. Energy is the ability to transfer energy. In simpler terms, work is the ability to push something and get it to change its position. The more you are changing your position, the faster you're moving, the more massive you are, the faster you're moving, the more energy you have, the more you have the ability to change something else's position, right? So it's just a commodity that we all trade around. Energy is the ability to change other systems. Change what? In the most stark form, their position. So that's what work. So the whole idea of work is that it transfers energy. But since some forces do no work at all over a round trip, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble. And we can say, okay, like when I'm pushing a block up, I'm doing work against gravity, I'm doing MGH to push a block up. I'm doing all this work against gravity, MGH. So I'm giving the thing energy. It's moving faster and faster. It's moving. Okay, now I hold it at this high height, right? So I stop it. So I was doing all this work on it, giving it all this energy, but now I stopped it. Now it's sitting here at a high height. This M is sitting at a high H, right? So in theory, it has no energy, but it has no kinetic energy, right? But because it was gravity that I was fighting against, because I know for a fact in advance that gravity always does the same amount of, always does 0 work over a round trip. I know in advance if this thing is sitting here, that if I let it go, I already know that the energy that it's going to get back on the way back down is exactly the amount that I have, the work that gravity will do on the way back down has to be exactly the flip of the work that I was doing on the box to bring it up. Oh, sorry. Oh, wait. Okay, well, I think I see what. Hold on. Okay, fair enough. No, I see what's in the direct chat. All right. I think okay. I'll jump ahead. We're not going to get to very far today, but all right. I need you to know these concepts for later and for electrostatics, but okay, we're not going to be able to skip to the last problem yet. We will. The last problem is huge, but I need to lay these down. But I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it. So, all right, I will go a little faster now. I can't get all the way to the last problem, but all right. Bottom line is potential energy is the work that a conservative force does to bring something back to equilibrium. So I'll skip this fast. So, and maybe I have to go back over this tomorrow or whatever, but I'll say this now then. For a spring force, the potential energy due to a spring, the potential energy is the integral from x naught to 0 of negative kx dx. That integral is the same as, so I'll just do this fast. And again, but you can ask more questions tomorrow again, but I appreciate, so someone is having the honesty. And by the way, you could submit that into the portals. I mean, someone's having the honesty to say like, can I get back to the topic a little bit? So definitely submit that in the portal. So, but here, so the integral from x naught to 0 of negative kx dx is the same as the integral from 0 to x naught of kx dx. That integral, the k is a constant, so it comes out. So it's k times the integral of 0 to x naught times x dx. I'm going to go to the next page now. Right, what I'm calculating right now is the potential energy due to a spring. You might not have done all of this out on your homework, but you do need to understand all of this in order to have done your homework honestly. So like, okay, you might have just written down a memorizer, but I need to know where that came from, and you need to, so anyway, so the integral of kx dx is k integral of x dx. I'm just rewriting that. The integral of x dx, I'm just going to say it.
Is it,
oh, yeah.
is it x over 2? Well, x squared divided by 2.
Awesome. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And I'm glad that people are with me. And again, I know, as I've said before, I knew this pace was going to be too fast for some people, too slow for others. I apologize for all that. We'll all get together eventually by the end. Some of you don't know where he just got that from. Others of you are like the person in the direct chat that wish I would. I totally get it. But yes, he's right. But I'll review this more tomorrow or answer questions. But he's right. So that's, and that means evaluated from 0 to x naught. Okay. Yeah. Oh, great question, Samantha. The reason the negative sign disappeared is because I flipped the limits of integration. Like I got rid of the negative because I was originally integrating from x. Great question. Notice I'm originally integrating by definition of potential energy. For potential energy, you integrate from arbitrary spot to equilibrium. So I was integrating from x naught to 0, the force of negative kx. But then in order to get rid of the negative, I flipped the limits, if that makes sense. And the whole round trip principle. I mean, this is the thing I'm like speeding a little bit now. What I'm saying to everybody is when you know that you're going to get back the same amount of energy coming into equilibrium that you lost going out, you can make this prediction. The whole idea of potential energy is we're really just making a prediction. We're saying we know how much energy this thing's going to gain on the way back because it's a conservative force. So we're going to say right now that at the top or stretched out on the spring, since we know how much kinetic energy is eventually going to gain, we're going to say that it's storing all that energy right now in the form of potential. Where is it storing it? In our minds. This is a mental construct. This is just a shortcut that we're getting away with because it's a conservative force. We say that conservative forces store energy just because we know what they're going to do. So potential energy is the energy you're going to get kinetically when you go back to equilibrium. So therefore, I'm doing this integral. I don't know if that answered Samantha's question or not. I hope it did, but that was a great question. So I'm doing the integral. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. So I'm doing the integral. So there it is. So then I evaluate. So all of this is to say the potential energy of a spring, the potential energy due to a spring at some spot x naught is K times that spot squared divided by 2. This is a GDP. This is 3. All of my big talking for the last like hour is to establish, if you want this as an equation to remember whatever, all this means is the potential energy due to a spring. The potential energy due to gravity is something else. The potential energy due to electricity is something else. Where I got it, where I derived it, was the definition of potential energy, which is work done by a conservative force to restore something to equilibrium. But now that I have this here, I can wrap this all up, even if I don't get to the other homework. I at least want to satisfy the person. Good. Thank you, Samantha. And again, I'm a direct chat person. I'm not mentioning his or her name. I totally hear the direct chat person, and I appreciate the honesty. we will get to everything you need to see. We will get to the last problem. I'm just not going to get to it today. I apologize, but just bear with me. But I hear you, and I appreciate the feedback. But so here we go. Now, finally, we could say, therefore, just to wrap all this up for here, for this one, therefore, KE. So this is now back to the homework for real. KE plus PE at X naught must equal KE plus PE at X equals 0, right? So now I could say 1/2 MV squared plus 1/2, and I know this is what a lot of you just did in one line, but ask yourself honestly if you really knew where this one line came from. That's the thing, okay? But yes, this is the line to use. This. Okay, and now, and notice also one habit I am trying to teach everybody is notice, I don't want you to talk as long as I talk. I'm trying to teach it. This is not what you do in your homework, but one thing I am doing that I want you to know is I'm postponing numbers as long as possible. I'm trying to keep everything in general terms as long as I can because general terms are always true. The numbers should be the last thing we do. So even before I plug in numbers right here, I can say I could divide both, I could factor out a 1/2 and divide both sides by the 1/2, so they all go away, right? And I can say, okay, at X equals X naught, at X equals X naught, I know that the velocity was given as 0, so that whole term goes to 0. At X equals 0, I know that X equals 0, the potential energy is 0, so that whole thing goes to 0. So then when I end up with here, and again, tomorrow I will do the other homework, I apologize, but let's just have closure on this problem. So what I end up with here is kx squared at X equals X naught. So really, all right. So what I have here is that kx naught squared equals mv squared, and I'm going to solve for v, right? So v squared equals kx naught squared over m. I'm watching the clock. I am watching the clock. But notice one thing, this line right here, in effect, this line that says 1/2 kx squared equals 1/2 mv squared, I'm going to tell you right now, that's true because I just went through all this work to derive it. It's true in this situation that the potential energy over here equals the kinetic energy over there because of the coincidence that there is no kinetic energy over here and there is no potential energy over there. It is not a formula to memorize. Like I'm going to tell you right now, if in the next question, in question 5, if you started by saying 1/2 mv squared equals 1/2 kx squared, you'd get question 5 wrong. If your answer was like 0.116 or 0.113 for question 5, you were wrong. And I'm not saying that to admonish anybody. I'm saying to justify all this work that I just did, I want you to know the principle is that kinetic plus potential over here equals kinetic plus potential over there. That's the principle that works for question 4 and question 5. It turns out in question 4 that kinetic over here equals potential over there. We are not saying that it is a law that kinetic always has to equal potential. That's what all of this is on, partly what I'm trying to say, okay? But anyway, if you caught that, you caught that. You'll see in question 5 whether you caught that or not. The answer to question 5 will be 0.095. If you got that, then you're with me, and then maybe it feels like I'm wasting your time, maybe, and I apologize, but I'm not actually. But so we get this. Notice I'm solving for V. I'm saving the numbers for the last possible minute because I might make an arithmetical error, and who wants to be punished a million times for that? So I have this. So I go to the next page.
Wait, you said the answer is 0.095?
Oh, not for this question, for the next question. For question 5, is 0.095. Yeah, and you got that.
Isn't it 0.95?
I think it's
I got 0.095.
yeah, 0.095. Yeah, it can't be.
And also negative 0.095.
Oh, sure, Nick. Oh,
yeah.
Very good, very good. Yeah, it can't be. It can't
okay.
be. Okay.
I was just.
We're cool. Or...
Wait, is it positive or negative 0.095?
I put.
Well, I got positive
I
0.095.
I put 2. I thought of it because technically, the signs basically just telling the direction. That's how I saw it. So I was iffy if I could put both positive or negative. So I wasn't really sure.
Yeah,
So it says speed and not velocity, and speed doesn't tell us direction. So
Yeah,
you can do
so-
positive and negative.
Right. Hold on. I know I'm confusing some people because we're jumping around here, but yes, I totally agree. First of all, yeah. So question 5, technically speaking, or strictly speaking, you could put 0.095 and or, I mean, both routes are legitimate for question 5, 0.095 or negative and or negative 0.095. Because you're right, I did say speed. So either of those is strictly correct for, I mean, technically you would put both. I mean, technically both routes are right for question 5. I know I'm losing some people because we're still on question 4, but yes, you guys are right. And you wait, hold on, I'm just looking. And I know like the chat is like lighting up here. Hold on. But yes, I'm with you guys and I'm glad you're with me. Hold on, let me just and if you did get 0.95, that does mean that you've gotten one major principle, which is that it's energy that's conserved. The sum of kinetic and potential has to be the same. Like if you got 0.095, you know what you're doing, or negative, you definitely know what you're doing, and good. And so I'll try to race along even more, but let me just make sure that everybody's with me on this question 4 at X. I'm saying that the answer for question 4 is approximately 3.87 meters per second. It asks for speed, so it's just the positive value. It's approximate, not because I'm lying or because I don't know, but because, we're taking the square root of a irrational number. So wait, let me look at it. So hopefully, and I know that just got a little crazy for some people. And I know, and again, guys, just so you know, this happens every single semester. I take a long time going over homework 1, and I go to a lot of places that frustrate people if they just like want the answers. I do sympathize with that, but I just want you to know that's part of the purpose of homework 1 is to lay out all this stuff, because we all know sort of different and remember different things from physics 1, and we have to look at them in more of a calculus way now. So all of you, and I do appreciate the feedback in private chat, but just at least know that I know it's like this every time. It's not because we've accidentally like forgotten the material or something. Like this is the way, and the truth is you guys are actually already moving faster than a lot of classes do. So we will get to everything. So let me just look in the, and I know it's like 6:41 now. So I was going to shift gears and go to the other homework. I'm going to tomorrow, but I won't, because I'm not going to keep you over time. Let me just slow down for like 4 minutes and say, first of all, like, thank you all for bearing with. I hope this is all sort of making sense. If the worst thing any of you is feeling right now is I'm getting a little bored because he's not moving on fast enough, then I hear you. But also, you know what? Like, if the worst thing you're feeling is a little bored because it's too slow, that's good. Like, treasure that feeling. Because the opposite feeling is that we're going too fast and you're confused. So it will go faster. So take it as a gift but we will get to all the answers. That's number 1. Number 2, tomorrow I'm going to start right away with the other sheet, just so we can get it out of the way with sheet 1A. Then we'll return to continue with these questions. And we'll be able to go through most of the next questions much faster now that we've laid all this out, most of this out. And then, of course, the big deal of all of this is the very last question. If you want to know, yeah, I believe the answer to the very last question, if this is what you're interested in, like private chat person and others, if you're interested, I believe the answer to the very last question on the whole sheet, I believe, is x equals 0.116 meters, I believe, 0.116 meters, like the very last question. But it takes some work to get there, and there's a lot of things I need to show whether you got that right answer or not. But yeah, if you got 0.116, you're doing something right. Now wait, so now we got 2 more minutes. Let me just look in the chat to see if, okay. I think it can be Annie still asking that. Chris, I think, yeah, okay. I think I answered all that positive. Okay, do the parameters, great question. Great question, Samantha. Do the parameters have to be x equals x naught and x equals 0? In general, if you're calculating, that's a great question. In general, if you're calculating work, in general, it's the integral from any x you want to any other x in general. But if you're looking at potential energy, the specific definition of potential energy, the 2 parameters would be x naught, which does mean any x you want, like any initial x. But yes, the other parameter is 0, is specifically 0 for the definition of potential energy, because the definition of potential energy really is the work that the conservative force will do to bring you back to the special spot known as x equals 0. Or if it's a case of gravity, it'd be h equals 0. Like the deal of potential energy is it's the work that is done to get you back to ground. The whole theory of it is when you're not at ground, we're thinking of that energy as being stored. We're thinking of it. It's really just stored in our memory banks. Potential energy is a prediction of how much energy you'll get when the conservative force returns you to equilibrium. We can make that prediction with conservative forces only because we already know in advance what they're going to do, because they always do on the way in whatever they did on the way out. So yeah, great question. But that is specifically a 0 at the top of the integral for the potential energy function. I'm just, okay, we got one more. I'm just looking at, give you a, well, yeah. Well, right. Also, what Evelyn said, I mean, in this case, we're specifically going to, but we are here in this case going to 0, but I actually do mean that 0 seriously for the general definition of potential. Okay, so you can be, yes. So what Samantha said again, you can manipulate X naught. X naught could be any number, it's just wherever you started, but you need to use X equals 0 as the baseline. Yes, not even almost, like, yes, that is the point. You got it. Okay, again, I want to thank you guys. I think you're really with me. I know it's all like, it's a little crazy. But oh no, okay, great. Yes, thank you all. Okay, I'll hear you tomorrow. Yes, we'll just pick up with the other one tomorrow. Just keep going, keep rocking the free world. Nothing new is due tomorrow. Nothing new is due tomorrow. Just catch up with this. Nothing new. Well, besides game turn 1 is due tonight at midnight, but that's it. Yes, just game turn 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Have a nice day. You too. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Have a good day, folks. Thank you.
Professor Yarverbaum.
Yes, I'm going to